Chapter 374. The aggrieved Adam drove the group home with a dark expression. On the way, Yunjian told Yun-yi as much as she could about the fact that she was new cruise's director. She did not hold anything back from the beginning. However, she kept one thing to herself, which was that the funds she used to start new cruise were all from a bank loan. It was not that Yun-yi did not believe her. Instead, he was convinced and accepted Yunjian's identity. Everything seemed to have returned to normal. Yunjian spent her days in school, the military training camp, Falcon Hall's headquarters, home, and other places. Her days were quite comfortable. At the same time, Yunjian was planning to make a trip back to Kosha Mercenaries HQ. She had thought of the plan a long time ago, but had not had the time to put it into practice. Yunjian planned to make a trip back to Kosha Mercenaries HQ during the winter break after the final exams. 3 weeks passed very quickly, and the final exam came as scheduled. After 2 days of exams, all the students were disoriented. Yunjian was the only one who was still in good condition. Wow, Jinjian, I'm finally free. I'm about to vomit blood after 2 days of exam papers. I still have to listen to the principal's speech later. Just thinking about it makes me dizzy, but I can finally have a break. Haha. You have no idea how long I've been waiting for this day. Chun Sinny's chatterbox voice rang in Yunjian's ears again. It had been a long time since she heard Chun Sinny's sarcasm, but Yunjian was not annoyed at all today. Qingyu had gone back to her hometown recently, so she did not come for the exams. Qingyu's parents were still alive. She was already 10 years old when she was abducted into the organization. 10 years old was enough for her to remember things. Qingyu did not stay long in the organization before she was picked by Snake Lizard to play with poison. It was only after she mastered her poison skills that she followed Yunjian around. It was safe to say that Qingyu did not go through the cruel elimination training of an assassin. Since her parents were still alive, it was only natural for her to visit them once in a while. Hey, Jianjian, are you listening to me? Chun Sinny saw that Yunjian was looking away. She didn't know what she was thinking, so she waved her hand and asked, I'm listening. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and replied to Chun Sinny. Chun Sinny started chatting again. Winter vacation was coming. Normally, the students would pack their bags and go home after finishing their exams and listening to the principal's winter vacation speech. She didn't need to go to school anymore. As for the final results, Longmin No. 1 High School had the habit of sending every student's report card to their home in the form of a letter. This way, every student's parents would receive a report card. This was also a good idea, because in this way, some students who did not do well in school but were afraid of being scolded by their parents would study hard. After Yunjian finished packing her bag, she saw Qin Yiru when she was leaving the classroom. Qin Yiru had applied for half a day's leave today. Yunjian was a student living in school, so Qin Yiru was here to pack Yunjian's bed and things to bring home. Just as Qin Yiru was packing Yunjian's bed and things, Yunjian's phone that had been silent for a long time vibrated all of a sudden. She glanced at Qin Yiru and walked out of the dorm to take out her phone to read the latest message. It was an urgent notice from Gu Junjian. Chapter 375. Gu Junjian usually did not send text messages. Therefore, under such circumstances, for Gu Junjian to send a text message, it must be something very important. Yunjian turned off her phone and went back to the dorm to see Qin Yiru packing everything on her bed into a woven bag. Qin Yiru was struggling to walk out with the bag in her hands. Mom, let me do it. Yunjian went over and snatched the bag from Qin Yiru. Xiao Jian, Mom can carry it. Qin Yiru called out when she saw Yunjian snatching the bag from her. I'll do it. Yunjian grinned and said to Qin Yiru, before heading out with the bag in one hand. Mom will carry your bag then. Otherwise, give it back to me. Qin Yiru went over to take the bag from Yunjian's shoulder and insisted on carrying it. The bag was light and Yunjian did not force it. The bag she was carrying was heavy, but it was nothing to her. In comparison, Yunjian was most satisfied with the motherly love she had now. After bringing everything home, Yunjian hurriedly told Qin Yiru that there was an emergency in the military before she headed out. Qin Yiru did not object to Yunjian's status as a member of the Advanced Special Forces, but she wanted Yunjian to put her safety first. This was the most basic request a mother had for her child. Xiao Jian, bring this pancake with you. You can have it on the way. It's dinner time now, you can't go hungry. Qin Yiru caught up to Yunjian when she saw her leaving in a hurry, and stuffed the pancake she had baked into Yunjian's hand. Thank you, Mom. Yunjian stuck out her tongue and smiled. Silly child, what are you thanking me for? We're family, so there's no need to be so formal. Qin Yiru replied with a smile. Yunjian nodded and left with a smile. After leaving the house, she went to the parking lot not far from Falcon Hall's headquarters. Her Ferrari sports car had always been parked here. Yunjian got into the Ferrari sports car. She sped up and the car sped off like a bolt of lightning. Soon they drove past the streets. In the military training camp, Chu Ning, Chu Xiangnan, and the others were already standing in a row. Yunjian sped to the outside of the military training camp. She ran inside and stood in line. If one took a closer look, they would see traces of the pancake on the corner of Yunjian's mouth. At this moment, other than Yunjian, Chu Ning, and the rest, there were also many veterans from the Special Forces standing at the side. Some were even official members of the Advanced Special Forces. Gu Junjian stood at the front of the group. His brows were tightly furrowed as he stared at the crowd. Is everyone here? Everyone report your numbers. Gu Junjian shouted. Then the group reported their numbers. After Gu Junjian verified the number of people, he cut to the chase. The mission this time is very urgent. That's why I suddenly called all of you to the military. Gu Junjian frowned and said with a serious expression. Then he continued. This morning, a priceless antique was stolen from the Zhe Province Museum. The thief is an internationally renowned thief who is skilled in martial arts. This antique is our Z country's national treasure. If it's stolen, it's not just the treasure that's lost, but also the dignity of the Z country. That's why I called all of you here today to get this item back. Chapter 376. Gu Yunjian's words were masculine and righteous, coupled with the heroic bearing of a soldier. Even though Gu Junjian was already middle-aged, it did not change his identity as the leader of the Advanced Special Forces. His words made everyone present feel a deep sense of oppression. Except for Yunjian. Report. Is the mission going to be carried out immediately? Leader Lu Shiyan asked. Gu Junjian glanced over and nodded. That's right. I'll be sending 3 teams to Country A to retrieve the stolen antiques. 3 teams meant that there were members from 3 teams. Usually, a team was made up of 7 to 8 people. Yunjian's team of 7 was considered one team. Sending 3 teams to carry out the mission showed that Gu Junjian really valued this mission. After Gu Junjian finished speaking, he pointed at the members of the other 2 teams. The 2 groups he was referring to were all Advanced Special Forces soldiers and veterans. Their abilities were the pioneers among the Advanced Special Forces, and they were the cream of the crop. When Gu Junjian pointed at them, it meant that those 2 teams had been included in the 3 teams heading to Country A for the mission. Finally, Gu Yunjian's hand stopped at Yunjian's team. Then Gu Junjian said to Yunjian's team of 7, Get ready. We'll depart to Country A in 30 minutes. I'll inform your family members one by one. Also, there are 7 people in your team. You've only given yourselves code names. Now think of a name for your team. Tell me in 30 minutes. Now go equip your weapons. This time, Gu Junjian wanted Yunjian's team of 7 to be fully armed. The mission this time was far more difficult than the previous one. The reason why Gu Junjian did not send veterans was that Yunjian's team of 7 had completed the mission in a shocking amount of time. This mission should not have been assigned to Yunjian's team of 7 rookies, but it was still assigned to them. This showed how much Gu Junjian valued Yunjian's team of 7. Yunjian and the others entered the weapons room. This time, they weren't only allowed to choose one weapon. They were fully equipped official Special Forces equipment. After equipping the equipment, they were no stranger to it. After the previous mission ended, Gu Junjian had increased the difficulty of the mission. Everything was done according to the standard of the Advanced Special Forces. This was both an honor and torture. These days, other than Yun Jian, everyone else was exhausted. But all in all, now was the time to check the results. Hey, let's quickly discuss. What should we name our team? Hee, how about my code name, Thunderbolt Squad? Chu Xiangnan laughed heartily as he spoke. Bah, that's so unpleasant to hear. Absolutely not. Chu Ning refuted Chu Xiangnan. Let the captain take it, Fang Sharan suddenly said. Me? I can't do it. Why don't you think about it, Yun Jian? Lu Shiyun hurriedly waved his hands. He kicked the ball of thinking of a team name to Yun Jian. Kings. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and said. What? The others were stunned. Team Monarch, the unique and unique. Yun Jian brushed away the hair that was covering her eyebrows and said. That's a good name. Chu Ning suddenly laughed and clapped her hands. She was the first to agree. We'll choose this name then. Captain Lu Shiyun nodded. Since the captain had spoken, the others naturally had no objections. Team Monarch, the unique and unique. Like a king, they ruled the world and stood at the top of the world. Who could bully them? Kill without mercy. Yun Jian pursed her lips. Chapter 377. Country A was Country Z's neighbor, bordering Country Z. However, due to the land route, it took them quite some time to reach Country Z. The mission this time was rather risky, which was why Gu Junjian had mentioned it before they came. However, no matter how risky the mission was, no one wanted to quit. Country A was a country at war, so its economy could not be compared to Country Z. Moreover, Country A's security was poor, so it was common for people to kill people with knives on the streets. Considering that there were more than 20 people in Team 3, Gu Junjian arranged for a large bus to take them all the way to Country A. The bus was 2 stories high, with seats on the upper floor and the lower floor. Chu Ning and the rest were fresh to them, so they walked up and down the bus quite a bit along the way. This bus is so cool, it's 2 stories high. It's just like our house. It's like a moving house. Chu Ning jumped up and down, sitting beside Yun Jian from time to time and exclaiming. Yun Jian, on the other hand, sat obediently on the window seat on the second floor of the bus. She looked out of the window, pursing her red lips, as if she was thinking about something. Because it was a big bus on the second floor, there were many seats. There were only about 20 people in total, so they sat in different places. In short, where there was no one sitting, one could sit anywhere. Yun Jian and the other 7 members of Team Monarch sat separately on the upper and lower floors. Chu Ning walked up and down the stairs. She left the seat beside Yun Jian and ran to the seat on the first floor. Yun Jian only smiled, criticizing in her heart. What a child who loves to walk. Due to the long journey, although Country A was a neighboring country to Country Z, it was no longer within Country Z. Therefore, there was still a distance to travel from Zhe province through many provinces. Many of them had already closed their eyes to rest. After all, it was another test of life and death in Country A. Every mission had its risks. Yun Jian closed her eyes and rested for a while. Yun Jian had just closed her eyes for less than 15 minutes, when a loud noise came from the first floor of the bus. Yun Jian frowned and opened her beautiful eyes. However, she heard a thunderous roar from the first floor of the bus. F***CK, what are you so proud of? Aren't you newbies who just joined the army? What can you do? Yun Jian had just heard that when footsteps came from the stairs leading to the second floor. It was Chu Ning who rushed up to Yun Jian and told her anxiously. Yun Jian, go take a look. Chu Xiangnan is arguing with the other teams. The other teams were naturally the other 2 teams apart from Team Monarch. Yun Jian, naturally, she could not pretend that nothing had happened. She stood up and followed Chu Ning from the second floor to the first floor. The first floor was already in an uproar. In front of Chu Xiangnan, a man in his 20s or 30s was being held back by his companions. He was yelling at Chu Xiangnan. You're just a bunch of newbies who just joined the team. Do you really think you're so important? Didn't you just complete a mission once? The man's tone was not to be underestimated. The man had a rough appearance. Yun Jian could tell at a glance that the man who was yelling at Chu Xiangnan was a member of the other team. Chapter 378. Xiao Weiming was a member of another team called Champ Squad. At the same time, he was already 29 years old, nearing his 30s. Even though he was not particularly old, he had been in the Special Forces for quite a number of years. He had carried out quite a number of boss missions, but he had never been promoted. Xiao Weiming and Chu Xiangnan were at each other's throats, but Xiao Weiming's emotions were more intense than Chu Xiangnan's. If not for Xiao Weiming's teammates holding him back, he would probably have started fighting with Chu Xiangnan. You called us rookies. What right do you have to say that? Chu Xiangnan's voice sounded a little high-pitched. Unlike his usual cheeky self, Chu Xiangnan seemed to be defending his sovereignty, as he retorted fearlessly at Xiao Weiming. Are all the rookies nowadays as arrogant as Team Monarch? Do you think you can ride all over us old team members, just because you've completed an outstanding mission? Let me tell you, brat. When we were majestic, you were still drinking milk in your mother's arms. Xiao Weiming raised his head and shouted at Chu Xiangnan, refusing to back down. What's going on? What's going on? Yun Jian had just gone down to the first floor when she saw Chu Xiangnan and Xiao Weiming shouting at each other. Before she could say anything, a strong voice came from behind her. A middle-aged man in his late 40s followed Yun Jian down the stairs from the second floor and spoke sternly. This stern and righteous middle-aged man was the captain of Champ Squad, Yu Fengcheng. Once Yu Fengcheng appeared, he had a strong presence. As soon as he spoke, Xiao Weiming, a member of Champ Squad under Yu Fengcheng, immediately settled down. Captain, this group of rookies is really cocky. They were bragging about their abilities just now. I just didn't like them and said a few words, and they yelled at me. Xiao Weiming complained to Yu Fengcheng. Yu Fengcheng was already in his 40s. He believed that he had plenty of experience, so when he swept his gaze over the crowd, he had a condescending attitude. Yu Fengcheng didn't look at Xiao Weiming. Instead, he looked at Chu Xiangnan and raised his voice. Where's your captain? Tell him to come out and talk to me. Yun Jian was standing beside Yu Fengcheng. She glanced at Yu Fengcheng from the corner of her eyes, and there was a hint of color in her eyes. But Yun Jian didn't say anything. I'm the captain. Lu Shiyin pushed aside the crowd and walked out. I don't care what your team members think, but when we're out on a mission, we must prioritize teamwork. You're all new recruits, so we veterans will give you some leeway in certain aspects. After all, you're still young and full of vigor, Yu Fengcheng said without any hesitation. Yu Fengcheng paused for a moment before continuing to speak to Lu Shiyin. In fact, his words were meant for all Team Monarch members. Young man, don't be complacent just because you've achieved something. There's always someone better than you. Don't forget that there's always someone better than you out there. With these few sentences, Yu Fengcheng's meaning was very clear. He had obviously heard about the mission Yun Jian's team of 7 went on previously. Back then, Yun Jian's team of 7 carried out a very difficult mission, but they completed it in less than half a day. News of that had already spread among the special forces. Yu Fengcheng's words were clearly aimed at Yun Jian's team, and he was sending them a very straightforward message. You may have some ability, but don't think too highly of yourself. Although Lu Shiyin was also a captain, he was at most in his 20s. In front of the experienced Yu Fengcheng, he lacked some boldness. Therefore, Lu Shiyin hummed a sincere Alright, that's all. Disperse, disperse. Don't make such a big fuss over such a small matter in the future. Yu Fengcheng said with a wave of his hand. As a result, the people who had gathered around also dispersed. Bah, you'd better remember this. Xiao Weiming spat at Chu Xiangnan and walked away. Chapter 379. Usually, when members quarreled with each other, their respective captains would step in to mediate. This time was no exception. Therefore, Yun Jian merely watched from the side without saying a word. By the time Yu Fengcheng represented Champ Squad to speak to Team Monarch's captain, Lu Shiyin, the situation was more or less settled. Even if Yu Fengcheng shared Xiao Weiming's dissatisfaction with Yun Jian's Team Monarch, he would only criticize Yun Jian, and the rest in a tactful manner. He would not be like Xiao Weiming, who was stubbornly clashing with Chu Xiangnan in a fit of rage. Moreover, with Yu Fengcheng's tone, the matter was resolved. When Xiao Weiming returned to his seat in a huff, Chu Ning ran over to help Chu Xiangnan, who was still fuming, to the second floor of the bus. They were separated from Xiao Weiming, who was still on the first floor. When they were on the way to the second floor, Chu Ning even called out to Yun Jian. Yun Jian, you're here too? Mm. Yun Jian nodded and followed them to the second floor of the bus. When Yun Jian went upstairs, she heard Xiao Weiming's mocking laughter. Hee, look at those Team Monarch members. All of them have skinny arms and legs. I don't mean to say this, but they must have been lucky to complete the previous mission so smoothly. TSK, these newbies, what kind of quality do they have? His voice was fading in the end. By then, Yun Jian had returned to the second floor of the bus. This is pissing me off. Chu Xiangnan could not help but blurt out before he even sat down. What's going on? I was just admiring the scenery outside the window. Why did you guys start arguing? Chu Ning asked Chu Xiangnan with a frown. Yun Jian had already found an empty seat and sat behind Chu Xiangnan and Chu Ning. I was just bragging to Hong Dork about Team Monarch's dominance earlier. I'm just bragging about myself. And I'm not bothering anyone. In the end, that guy just couldn't stand me. It's fine that he scolded me, but he even called us Team Monarch rookies. He said that the missions we completed back then were all due to luck. I'm so pissed off. Chu Xiangnan spoke a long string of words, but at this time, his mood was extremely complicated. Looking at his expression, one could tell that Chu Xiangnan was really angry. Chu Ning stopped bickering with Chu Xiangnan and spoke up for Chu Xiangnan instead. All right, don't be angry. When we reach Country A, we'll try our best to snatch back the antiques before they do. When the time comes, we'll rely on our abilities to humiliate them. In fact, although Chu Ning and Chu Xiangnan were usually like enemies when they were together, scolding each other and teasing each other, they would always help each other when they encountered a problem. Yun Jian leaned her head lazily with both hands behind her back. She looked at the two people sitting in front of her and smiled with her eyes narrowed. Since there was nothing else for her to do, Yun Jian closed her eyes again and rested for a while. The exclusive two-story bus from Z country to a country didn't stop moving. The scenery outside the window changed again and again. Yun Jian sat in the bus and rested for a long time. The bus stopped moving at night. After all, it was not safe to drive at night, and the driver needed to rest as well. With that, when Yun Jian and the rest arrived in Country A, it was already 6 or 7 o'clock the next night. At night, Yun Jian and the rest rested on the bus seats, leaning against the seat. It was not good to sleep like that, so when they arrived in Country A, they immediately checked into a hotel. That was because the people in Country A did not speak Mandarin or English, but their own language. Therefore, when they entered the hotel, the three teams, more than 20 people, realized that there was a language barrier. Wanting to give it a try, Yu Fengqing scanned the crowd like the leader of the group and asked, "Who among you can speak Country A's language?" When Yu Fengqing scanned the group, he did not even look at Yun Jian and the rest. In his opinion, Yun Jian and the rest were new recruits who did not have any achievements. How could they know Country A's language? Chapter 380. Yu Fengqing glanced at his own champ squad, then looked at another member called Flying Dragon Squad, and asked them a question. Yu Fengqing did not care about Yun Jian's Team Monarch at all. He did not even look at them when he was questioning them. Hence, when Yun Jian's melodious voice rang out, it came from behind Yu Fengqing. Yu Fengqing was stunned. He turned around and stared at Yun Jian like everyone else in Champ Squad and Flying Dragons. He raised his brows in disbelief. "You know how to speak. Are you sure?" His tone was filled with disbelief. If it were anyone else, Yu Fengqing and the rest might have believed her. However, Yun Jian was the youngest among them. Could she really learn Country A's language at such a young age? Country A didn't speak English. Yun Jian did not care about the disbelief in Yu Fengqing and the rest's eyes. She walked to the front desk of the hotel and knocked on the table with her fingertips. Then, she looked at the Country A lady at the front desk and spoke in a language that was almost the same as a Country A person's. "Hello, beautiful lady. We have a total of 21 people. Please give us 7 rooms." Yun Jian and the rest had a total of 21 people. 7 rooms would be just right for 3 people each. Yin Jian, Chu Ning, and Jiang Weiwei were all girls. Hence, they could share a room. All right, beautiful lady. The country lady at the front desk gave Yin Jian a beautiful smile and issued the room tickets. The moment Yin Jian spoke to the country lady, Yu Fengqing and the rest were completely stunned. Even if Yu Fengqing and the rest did not know country A's language, they could tell that Yin Jian's accent was the same as the country A lady at the front desk. Moreover, the country A lady at the front desk even replied to Yin Jian. Obviously, she understood what Yin Jian meant. Yin Jian could really speak country A's language. Yu Fengqing and the rest were stunned, especially Yu Fengqing. He watched as Yin Jian walked back with the receipt for the room. Once he thought of how he looked down on Yin Jian, his face darkened, as though he had fallen into a cesspool. You can check in now. Yin Jian waved the receipt and room key in her hand. Country A's hotel registration did not require complicated procedures. Moreover, Country A's security was not comprehensive. Hence, Yin Jian had already gotten the receipt and key after paying. The key was the hotel's key. However, due to the backward economy, it was different from China's. Due to Yin Jian's presence, everyone returned to their rooms swiftly. Once they were back in the hotel room, Chu Ning collapsed on the bed and chuckled at Yin Jian. Hehe, Yin Jian, you're really something. Just how ugly was the expression of the leader of the champ squad just now? Serves them right for looking down on us. Chu Ning and Chu Xiangnan were used to having their emotions written all over their faces. Yin Jian only smiled faintly. Knock, knock, knock. Just then there was a knock on the door. I'll go open the door. Jiang Weiwei had just put down her luggage when Chu Ning jumped up from the bed and ran to open the door barefooted. The door opened. The person standing outside was none other than the captain Lu Shiyin. Pack up. We'll gather in the lobby on the first floor. The 3 of us will discuss the plan together. Lu Shiyin was here to inform them. Okay, got it. Chu Ning gestured at Lu Shiyin. Yin Jian walked around the room. She did not take off her shoes. Hearing Lu Shiyin's words, she immediately followed him out. The lobby on the first floor was a place that this relatively high-end hotel provided for travelers to relax and chat. By the time Yin Jian, Chu Ning, and Jiang Weiwei went downstairs, Yu Fengqing and the rest were already standing in the lobby. Tisk, women are so troublesome. Xiao Weiming felt that the matter was not big enough, so he shouted loudly. Chapter 381. Xiao Weiming's provocative words had no effect on Yin Jian. At the same time, Chu Xiangnan, Chu Ning, and the rest automatically blocked Xiao Weiming's words and ignored him. Xiao Weiming was directly ignored. He snorted, and in the end, he did not make a sound. All right, everyone quiet down. Yu Fengqing acted as the leader of the 3 squads again. He slapped the coffee table in front of him and shouted. The moment Yu Fengqing spoke, everyone quieted down. All 3 squads are here for the same mission, so we have to work together. Moreover, the target of this mission is the internationally renowned thief. Yu Fengqing expressed his opinion. So you're saying that all 3 squads have to work together? Someone asked. Yu Fengqing continued to express his opinion, and what he said seemed to make sense. Yes, all 3 squads will work together to catch that thief and get the item back. So during this period, I hope that all 3 squads can work together without any disputes and work together to complete the mission. That was Yu Fengqing's opinion. What's more, Yu Fengqing's words were reasonable. Even he was impressed by himself. Lu Shiyin frowned and didn't say anything. I don't agree. Just as the group of people were almost done with their discussion, a clear female voice rang out again, interrupting everyone. Yu Fengqing's eyebrows twitched when he heard the voice. He turned to look for the source of the voice, and saw Yin Jian standing in the same spot. She pursed her red lips, and looked at everyone's gazes gradually falling on her. After a few seconds of silence, Yin Jian repeated, I don't agree. We have 3 squads with 21 people. If all 3 squads walk together, don't you think it's too conspicuous? It was like telling a thief who had stolen an antique that they were here to catch him. So I can't accept it. Yin Jian's words immediately attracted the rebuttal of everyone present. What we advocate is to work together. You're trying to be independent. Someone from the champ squad couldn't stand it anymore and shouted at Yunjian. Perhaps it was because of Yunjian's young age. Even though she spoke fluent country's language, no one was convinced. That's right. Young lady, you're still too inexperienced. We've completed at least 100 missions. Which one of them wasn't done as a team? We're on a mission now. This isn't the time to let your tongue run wild. Yu Fengqing had just suffered a setback. He wanted to poke Yunjian's spirit, so he refuted Yunjian with the tone of an elder. Yunjian only chuckled. Especially when you said that he had completed at least 100 missions. He had almost laughed out loud. But she didn't laugh in the end. She turned to look at Lu and the others, and asked, "What about you guys? Do you want to work with them or with me?" Yunjian ignored Yu Fengqing, but her words were obvious. She was asking Lu Shiyin and the others if they wanted to complete the mission with her, or follow Yu Fengqing's arrangement, and complete the mission with Yu Fengqing and the others. Young lady, even a fool would know what to choose. You can either leave on your own or come with us. The person from Champ Squad who had spoken just now mocked Yunjian again. Yu Fengqing also raised his head high. From what he could see, Lu Shiyin and the others would definitely follow them. After all, Yunjian was just a teenager who had yet to reach adulthood. Even if she was good, where could she go? But the team that Yu Fengqing led was different. He had led his own team and completed countless missions. There was no way Lu Shiyin would take Team Monarch and leave with a brat like Yunjian. Chapter 382. What? Yu Fengqing thought that since Lu Shiyin was the leader of Team Monarch, Lu Shiyin would definitely choose to go with him. He did not expect Lu Shiyin to choose to go with Yunjian instead. I'll go with Yunjian too. Chu Ning said without hesitation after Lu Shiyin. Me too. Me too. Then, other than Lu Shiyin, the other 5 voices followed without hesitation. However, everyone's choice was the same. This included Jiang Weiwei, who was not at odds with Yunjian in the beginning. She had chosen Yunjian's side with a determined voice. Yu Fengqing was so angry that his hands trembled. He swallowed hard and looked at Yunjian and the rest. Finally he said, "Fine you guys. I'm sincerely inviting you to cooperate with us, because you're new to the game. But since you don't appreciate it, so be it. Young people, you're still young and hot-headed after all. If you're on your own." Yu Fengqing waved his hand and left in a huff. However, Yu Fengqing still believed that what he said was right. At the same time, he planned to wipe his eyes and watch Yunjian and the rest fail because he chose not to work with them today. Yunjian did not expect Lu Shiyin and the rest to believe her so much. She only smiled and looked at them without saying a word. However, everything was wrapped up in her words. Once Yu Fengqing left, the 2 teams split up. However, it was certain that Yu Fengqing had convinced Flying Dragon Squad. The current situation was that Champ Squad and Flying Dragon Squad had started working together. After rejecting Yu Fengqing's invitation, Yunjian, Chu Ning, and Jiang Weiwei gathered in Lu Shiyin's room at night. The 7 of them began to discuss the plan. Coincidentally, while they were discussing the plan, Yunjian received a message from Gu Junjian. The message on the phone was very simple, but it was a very useful message because there was a clue written on it. The thief who stole the antique was last seen at Tiandi Canyon in Country A's F City. The Tiandi Canyon was a famous scenic spot in Country A. In the canyon, there were dozens of kilometers of land. Looking from afar, other than large rocks, there was not a single blade of grass. Moreover, the canyon was uneven, winding and steep. F*CK. Why would the thief go to such a place after stealing the antique? After reading the message, Chu Xiangnan could not help cursing under his breath. Probably because he has nothing better to do, haha. Chu Ning laughed. Tiandi Canyon. Yin stood up and looked at the group. It will take 2 hours. We'll leave tomorrow morning. We'll rest and rest. We'll sleep from now on. We'll wake up at 4 tomorrow morning. Yin stood up, looked at the group and spoke. 4 o'clock. Oh my god. Chu Xiangnan complained. We sleep. Yunjian and the other 2 returned to their rooms. Yunjian could sleep at any time and Jiang Weiwei could adjust her sleeping time. Chu Ning, on the other hand, rolled around for a while before falling asleep. The next morning, there was no light at all. It was so dark that one could not even see their own fingers. Chu Ning was dragged out of bed by Yun Jian. Other than Yun Jian, the rest were still sleepy. However, with Yun Jian leading the group, they quickly went to the nearest bus station and boarded the earliest bus to F City. It was already 6 o'clock when Yu Fengcheng and the rest woke up. He thought about it and decided to look for Yun Jian. Yun Jian was the only one among them who could speak Country A's language. When Yu Fengcheng knocked on Yun Jian and the rest's door, he was stunned to find that the room was empty. However, Yu Fengcheng and the rest knew that Yun Jian and the rest must have gone to F City first. Chapter 383. When Yu Fengcheng and the rest boarded the bus to Tiandi Canyon in F City, Yun Jian and the rest had already alighted. The Tiandi Canyon in F City was actually a scenic spot in Country A. Within the Tiandi Canyon, there was no dense vegetation within a 100-mile radius. Even if there was, it was scattered across a vast area. In short, it was basically impossible to see a dense forest in the Tiandi Canyon. Although the Tiandi Canyon was a scenic spot, there were not many people. Moreover, the scenic spot was free to enter and exit, so there was no need to buy a ticket to enter. Due to the vastness of the Tiandi Canyon, if a person were to walk in, they would not be able to walk out even after a few days. Therefore, Yun Jian and the rest negotiated and rented a jeep from a car rental agency. The rental car was not expensive as Yun Jian had given them quite a bit of Country A's currency before the mission. Moreover, Yun Jian knew Country A's language, so they were able to rent a car very quickly. The jeep was quite big, so the 7 of them could barely squeeze into it. Feng Shaoran was driving, and his driving skills were not bad. Moreover, in such a vast Tiandi Canyon, there was no need to drive very fast if they were to drive aimlessly. Yun Jian, what should we do next? Even if that master thief is here, this place is so vast. If we keep searching aimlessly, it'll be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Lu Shiyan turned to ask Yun Jian out of habit. Although Lu Shiyan was the captain of Team Monarch, he had unknowingly treated Yun Jian as the core, and would always ask for her opinion whenever something happened. The other members also unknowingly treated Yun Jian as the core, so Lu Shiyan as the captain and Hong Fan as the vice-captain were just decorations. Head south. Yun Jian turned to look out of the window, pursing her red lips as she said, head south. Feng Shaoran was still driving the jeep. When he heard Yun Jian's words, he immediately turned the steering wheel and headed south. Yun Jian, why are we heading south? Just as Lu Shiyan was about to speak, Chu Ning, who had nothing to do along the way, snatched the opportunity to speak. Chu Ning took the initiative to ask the question that was on everyone's mind. This heaven and earth Grand Canyon extended in all directions, and it was a rocky mountain range that stretched as far as the eye could see. When the car drove on the road, it was also undulating. Sometimes, it would even pass through 2 mountains. Fortunately, they had brought a compass, so they could distinguish north from south. However, everyone had a question. Why did they head south? Even Yun Jian and the others could not find out where the thief was in the Tiandi Canyon. They only knew that the thief was last seen here. How could Yun Jian be so sure that the thief master had gone south? Although everyone was suspicious, even if they had taken the wrong path, they still had to follow Yun Jian. Yun Jian reached into the pocket of her newly bought long-down jacket and took out a map with a label and a very detailed introduction. She passed the map to Chu Ning, who was sitting beside her, and said to the rest, I got this from the car rental place. It's a panoramic map of the Tiandi Canyon. Head south and there's a water source in the south. A water source means that there must be people living there. If we head in other directions, forget about a water source, we'll enter a desert area. Even if the thief wants to hide from us, can he avoid a water source? Can he not eat? Therefore, the south must be the path he must take. Chapter 384. After listening to Yun Jian's analysis, everyone felt that they had gained a lot of knowledge. There were indeed many maps of the nearby scenic spots in the car rental store, but apart from Yun Jian, no one else would bother to understand them. At the same time, No one would think of getting a map to look at. The map was actually universal. Although Lu Shiyun and the rest couldn't understand the words on it, they could still distinguish the coordinates on it. Moreover, most maps were in English. As for Yun Jian, the moment she arrived at the car rental store, she took a map and understood the terrain. She also knew how to analyze the terrain, and finally came to a conclusion. Actually, there were many things that no one could tell you the answer to, but you could find the answer from the environment. For example, that master thief. Unless he was courting death, he would go in the direction of human tracks. Without a doubt, the direction with human tracks was the south, because it could be seen from the map that apart from the south, if one went in any other direction, they would end up in a boundless desert. Since we know the direction, Fang Xiaoran speed up the car. Chu Xiangnan also happily stepped forward and interjected. No need. Yun Jian immediately retorted Chu Xiangnan. She pursed her red lips and continued. Drive slowly, don't be anxious. We don't have to alert the enemy. In the eyes of that master thief, we are just a group of tourists who came to the Tiandi Grand Canyon for a vacation. After saying that, Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. However, everyone understood what she meant. She meant that before confirming who the master thief was, everyone should pretend that they were just a group of students who came to the Tiandi Grand Canyon for a vacation. Fang Xiaoran drove the jeep at a very slow speed. After driving for about an hour, Yun Jian looked at the scenery outside the window and suddenly saw that it had changed. It was no longer a barren wasteland or a large piece of rock. Instead, there was a small upstream river, and on the other side of the river was a large village. Everyone was delighted. Fang Xiaoran didn't turn his head but asked Yun Jian. Yun Jian, are we going into the village? Yes, let's find a place to rest and stay for the night. Yun Jian nodded. Thus, the group entered the village. The men in country A were used to wearing a headscarf on their heads, while the women used a headscarf that covered their entire head, except for their facial features. This was the custom of country A. Yun Jian and the others got off the car, and Yun Jian went to the village head to seek shelter. The village chief and the villagers expressed a strong welcome to the guests from afar. In the end, the village chief divided Yun Jian and the others into 4 groups and arranged them to live in 4 different households in the village. Yun Jian was arranged to live alone in a seemingly poor family. This family was very hospitable. The hostess was in her 40s, and her name was Adia. Adia had a daughter who was 2 years younger than Yun Jian. Her name was Maiboba. Adia's husband had already passed away, so Adia had to raise her child Maiboba alone. Life was very difficult for her. In spite of it, Adia expressed the strongest welcome to Yun Jian, an outsider. In less than half a day, Adia's daughter Maiboba had already become familiar with Yun Jian. In addition, there was no language barrier between Yun Jian and the people in country A, so Maiboba seemed to like her sister very much. Maiboba shook Yun Jian's hand and looked at Yun Jian expectantly. Big sister, can you accompany me to the river to catch fish? Yun Jian also liked this little sister, who was 2 years younger than her. She nodded and followed Maiboba to the river in the village. There were already many children of Maiboba's age standing by the river. All the children were catching fish in the most primitive way, holding a long, sharpened bamboo pole, standing in the shallow and clear river, looking at the fish swimming back and forth, and directly poking them with the bamboo pole. Maiboba had just taken Yun Jian's hand to the river when they were surrounded by a group of careless boys. Chapter 385. Because she didn't have a father, she had been bullied by these naughty children since she was a child. Originally, Maiboba had been bullied to the point of numbness, but in front of Yun Jian, the elder sister she had just met, she was surrounded and mocked. Maiboba's face immediately turned pale. We're just here to slack off, don't be like this. Maiboba's face was pale. She was afraid that Yun Jian would ignore her, because she was bullied by these boys. So she looked at the group of boys around her with pleading eyes and said. Yun Jian's eyes flashed. Maiboba had been bullied since she was a child. Because she didn't have a father, the naughty children around her had always made fun of her, and even made up poems about her life experience. Maiboba was not as alone as she was now when she was a child. She used to have friends. But later, her friends were scared away by these boys, and were no longer willing to play with her. When Yunjian moved into my Boba's house, my Boba was half surprised and half happy. Especially when Yunjian didn't refuse to make friends with her. My Boba's heart was overflowing with joy. But now, the actions of these boys made my Boba afraid. She was afraid that because of these boys, the elder sister she had just met would not be willing to make friends with her. Slack off. Haha, with just the two of you. At this time, a heavy sarcastic voice suddenly came. A 16 or 17-year-old boy with a dark complexion, but a decent appearance pushed the crowd aside, and stood in front of my Boba and Yunjian. This 16 or 17-year-old youth seemed to be the king of this group of boys, because when this youth appeared, the other boys all cheered and made way for him. Jilliheng. My Boba looked at the 16 or 17-year-old boy with some fear, and couldn't help exclaiming. The boy called Jilliheng stretched out his hand, raised his head, hooked Yunjian with his finger, and then said arrogantly, I heard that you're a foreigner and my Boba's new friend? Ha! How dare you be friends with my Boba without my consent? Jilliheng's tone was very tough. That feeling of I am the master made Yunjian narrow her eyes. Why not? Yunjian raised her eyebrows. She narrowed her eyes and replied in fluent country-Z. Big sister, don't. Let's go. He's Jilliheng, the overlord of our village. No one can challenge his dignity. Let's go. My Boba tugged at Yunjian's clothes and said with some fear. Yunjian lowered her eyes and retracted her gaze. She did not intend to be nosy. She was here to carry out a mission. That godly thief could be around at any time. If she let her guard down, or if she showed off her skills, wouldn't she be luring the snake out of its hole? Just as Yunjian and my Boba turned around and took 2 steps, Jilliheng's voice came from behind again. Hey, are you really leaving? However, Yunjian ignored him. Jilliheng was anxious. It was rare for him to meet a girl who was not afraid of him mentally. Purely out of curiosity, he wanted to stop Yunjian. However, seeing that she did not move at all, Jilliheng shouted again. Stop, stop, stop. Let's have a fishing competition. Let's see who can catch more fish in 10 minutes. If you win, I won't bully my Boba anymore. How about it? And I promise that no one will bully her in the future. Really? Yunjian heard Jilliheng's words and instantly paused. She turned around and asked. Of course I Jilliheng am a man. I never go back on my words. Jilliheng patted his belly and promised. Then let's begin. Yunjian's speed of change was unpredictable. Jilliheng was also slightly stunned. However, when he thought that she was just a girl younger than him, he did not think much of it. Therefore, Jilliheng immediately asked someone to bring 2 bamboo poles. He and Yunjian each took a bamboo pole. When Lu Shiyin and the others met at their respective residences and walked across the river to find Yunjian, they happened to see Yunjian holding a bamboo pole and preparing to compete with Jilliheng in fishing. Chapter 386. Yunjian was not disturbed by the appearance of Lu Shiyin and Chu Xiangnan at all. At this time, she was already standing in the stream with Jilliheng. Most streams in winter were bitterly cold, but strangely, the spring water of this stream did not make people feel cold at all. On the contrary, people standing in the stream would feel warm. It's starting, Jilliheng said to Yunjian with a bamboo pole in his hand, glancing at her. Okay. Yunjian nodded. She narrowed her eyes and nodded to Jilliheng with a bamboo pole that was sharp enough to stab a fish to death. Yunjian, come on. Chu Ning and the others could not understand the shouts of the group of country A people. But Chu Ning waved at Yunjian and cheered for her. Yunjian kept her eyes squinted, staring at the bamboo pole in her hand. Big sister, come on. My Boba also looked at Yunjian gratefully. At the same time, she also raised her voice and shouted for Yunjian in her Mandarin. Ha! Jilliheng suddenly chuckled. A wicked smile that did not match his age climbed up the corners of his lips. Chi! Jilliheng stabbed the bamboo pole in his hand into the stream and stabbed a small fish that was swimming freely. Yunjian narrowed her eyes and also stabbed the bamboo pole in her hand into the stream. It missed. Ha ha ha. It missed. Jilliheng's group of friends chuckled at Yunjian, Yunjian's stab with the bamboo pole missed. Chu Ning and the others were also disappointed for a while. Yunjian was not in a hurry. She lowered her head and did not show any expression. Hee. Jiliheng also laughed. He laughed even more presumptuously, and at the same time, he stabbed the bamboo pole in the stream several times in a row. Chi 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 chi. 5 consecutive stabs. A fish appeared on the bamboo pole in Jiliheng's hand. It could be said that Jiliheng had never missed. He then looked at Yunjian. She had also stabbed him a few times, but she didn't even manage to hit him once. Jiliheng's group of friends became even more excited. They began to shout arrogantly, Jiliheng! 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 What's wrong with Yunjian? Chu Xiangnan also frowned. He was a little disappointed that Yunjian did not live up to his expectations. He looked as if he could not wait to replace Yunjian and win. Shut up! Jiang Weiwei, who had been silent all this while, suddenly kicked Chu Xiangnan and growled at Chu Xiangnan. The others were also frightened by Jiang Weiwei's serious appearance, but they all frowned, not knowing what she was talking about. Jiang Weiwei furrowed her brows. She silently looked at Yunjian, who seemed to be using all her strength to use the bamboo pole to prick the fish, but was unable to do so. She did it on purpose. But why? Not long after, the bamboo pole in Ji Jiheng's hand was full of fish. Ji Jiheng had already reached a new level of fishing. He was standing with his back facing Yunjian. Another fish was successfully harvested by him. Yunjian suddenly narrowed her eyes. She took out the butterfly knife from her pocket when Ji Jiheng completely let down his guard. She had already moved behind Ji Jiheng in a flash. She lifted her leg and kicked Ji Jiheng's back, sending him flying to the shore. At the same time, as everyone watched this sudden change in horror, Yunjian had already arrived in front of Ji Jiheng. The butterfly knife in her hand did not wait for Ji Jiheng to react. She placed it on Ji Jiheng's neck. Outsider, what are you doing? You can't win the fishing competition. What are you doing to Ji Jiheng? The group of boys immediately shouted. Chu Xiangnan and the others were also confused. Yunjian, what are you doing? Even if you lose, just admit defeat. It's not like you can't afford to lose. Chu Xiangnan even opened his mouth and said. Yunjian ignored everyone. She maintained her original posture and narrowed her eyes. The butterfly knife in her hand was even closer to Ji Jiheng's neck. Do you think I can't recognize you just because you've disguised yourself? Our famous thief god, Mr. Peter. Yunjian looked at Ji Jiheng and said with a smile. Chapter 387. Yunjian spoke in Chinese, so other than Chu Xiangnan and the others who were completely shocked, the group of boys from a country, including my boba, could not understand. However, this did not include Jiliheng, who was lying on the ground, who was also the thief Peter. After being recognized, Peter stopped pretending. He was not angry, nor did he fly into a rage, because Yunjian saw through him. Instead, he reached out to push away the butterfly knife in Yunjian's hand and stood up. Needless to say, after being recognized, Peter was really shocked for a while. When he disguised himself as Jiliheng, even Jiliheng's mother could not recognize him. How could he be recognized by this young girl, who was not even 18 yet? Who are you? Since he stopped pretending, Peter reached out to pull off the human skin mask on his face. He looked at Yunjian and asked. Under the mask was a face that was completely different from Jiliheng's. The face under the mask looked to be in his 20s. His skin was very tender, and there was a trace of handsomeness between his eyebrows. His nose was tall and straight, and he looked a bit like a mixed-race person. Yunjian did not threaten him with the butterfly knife. She narrowed her eyes and smiled as she shouted at Peter. Your ancestor. F***ck, don't tell me you're. Peter heard Yunjian's familiar words. He could not help but jump and shout while pointing at Yunjian. The only person who could stand in front of him and call him his ancestor was that terrifying woman. Peter looked at Yunjian in a daze. He gestured at Yunjian and asked in surprise, why do you look completely different? Take a guess. Yunjian crossed her arms. She did not look at Peter. Instead, she curved her red lips and smiled slightly. She did not recognize him at first, but in her eyes, Peter's disguise as Jiliheng was too flawed. First of all, she could see from Peter's face that there were creases on his face and around his ears. As for Peter's identity, first of all he stole the antiques. Stealing antiques that were heavily guarded in Ja province was not a simple matter. At the very least, that was something only a world-class thief could do. Back then, Yun Jian knew a world-class thief who was good at stealing, Peter. Another characteristic of Peter was that he loved to play. Just like just now. Once Peter started playing the game of fishing, he couldn't stop. And Yun Jian took advantage of Peter's loss of vigilance to make her move. While Pete and Yun Jian were chatting happily and acknowledging each other, the boys around them were so frightened that they ran home crying for their mothers when they saw Pete, who suddenly tore off his human skin mask and changed his face. Lu Shiyin, Chu Xiangnan, and the others were completely dumbfounded. All of them had heard Yun Jian calling Pete thief god just now. This meant that Peter, who had suddenly changed his face, was the thief they had been looking for. But looking at the situation, could it be that Yun Jian knew him? Everyone was panic-stricken, but no one said anything. In fact, Yun Jian and Peter did know each other. That was something that happened in Yun Jian's previous life. This Peter was actually a world-famous thief. It was said that he had never failed to steal anything. But in fact he had failed once. The reason was that the thing that Peter wanted to steal was also the target of Yun Jian's mission. Later on, the two of them met, and Yun Jian won directly by force. Before Yun Jian took the thing and ran away, Peter shouted at her. "Who the hell are you? How dare you steal from me?" "Your ancestor." Yun Jian replied with this sentence. In general, Peter's skills were not bad, but it was the first time he lost to a woman, so he had a deep impression of Yun Jian. However, Peter didn't know about Yun Jian's other identities. He only knew that this woman, Yun Jian, was really terrible. The thing that he had stolen was clearly in his hands, but in the end, it was snatched away by Yun Jian. Chapter 388. I am my great-aunt. No wonder my eyelids have been twitching since this morning. Why did you come back to look for me? Oh my God. Don't tell me you want to take away the treasure that I worked so hard to steal again? Returning to reality, Peter clutched his chest exaggeratedly. He looked at Yun Jian, as if he was looking at the devil, and shouted at her. Lu Shiyin and the others were even more surprised when they saw this. Judging from Yun Jian and Peter's words and actions, they seemed to be very familiar with each other. However, Yun Jian pursed her red lips and smiled slightly. Then she reached out her hand. You guessed right. Hand it over obediently. Peter retracted his hand and made a face as if he was about to die. Then he clutched his pocket tightly. Are you really going to take it away? There's no room for negotiation? No. Yun Jian's deep eyes flashed. She opened her mouth and didn't allow for any rebuttal. All right then. Peter could only reach out his hand and rummage through his pocket. Then, he reluctantly took out an emerald jade pendant and handed it to Yun Jian unwillingly. This emerald jade pendant was the one that was lost in the Ja Province Museum. Before they came, Gu Junjian had shown Yun Jian and the others a photo of the lost antique. It was this emerald jade pendant. Although it was just a jade pendant, this jade pendant was actually an ancient relic left behind by a famous scholar in the Tang dynasty. It had been quite a few years since then. Naturally, it was worth a lot. Just like that, the mission is completed? Chu Xiangnan and the others stood where they were. They watched as Peter obediently handed the jade pendant to Yun Jian without any resistance. All of them turned pale with fright. After all, Peter was an internationally renowned thief, wasn't he? He actually handed the antique jade pendant to Yun Jian just like that? This meant that the mission was successfully completed. Wasn't this mission supposed to be quite dangerous? Why did the thief obediently hand over the item as soon as Yun Jian showed up? Who exactly was Yun Jian? However, if Peter heard Chu Xiangnan and the others silently criticizing him for handing over the antique jade pendant to Yun Jian, he would be in deep trouble. Peter would definitely put his hands on his hips and shout at Chu Xiangnan and the others. When he fought with Yun Jian, both his arms were broken by Yun Jian. If Peter hadn't dodged quickly, his entire body would have been broken by Yun Jian. Peter swore that he would never meet such a terrifying woman again in his life. But this time, It was such a coincidence. All right, you can go now, Yun Jian said with a grin, looking at Pete. Peter wanted to cry but had no tears. He quickly packed up his things and ran away. His speed was even faster than a car. After Peter left, he wasn't a bad person. It didn't take long for him to release the real Geely Hunter. The real Geely Hung had tasted the feeling of being bullied by Peter. From then on, he repented and no longer bullied my Boba and her group of weaklings. Yun Jian and the others stayed the night under the warm hospitality of the villagers. The next day, Feng Sharon drove the jeep and left. My Boba sent Yun Jian and the others all the way to the entrance of the village, until Yun Jian and the others could no longer be seen. This encounter was like a fleeting moment in life. Once they parted, it would be forever. After leaving the village, they returned along the same path. As soon as they returned to the crowded flat ground, they met Yu Fengqing and the others who were still searching around the canyon, but to no avail. How dare you leave without saying a word? Do you know what kind of behavior this is? This is abandoning your companions and selfish behavior. What kind of future do you think you can have? You still want to rely on your own abilities to complete the mission. I think you're dreaming. Due to the language barrier, Yu Fengqing and the others couldn't even rent a car. They had been walking since yesterday morning and were extremely tired. When he saw Yun Jian and the others, Yu Fengqing rushed up and scolded them like an elder. In reality, he was resentful that Yun Jian knew Country A's language, but didn't team up with them. Chapter 389. Pack up what team? Return to the country? Wait a minute, mission completed? Yu Fengqing was about to yell at Yun Jian, but after a few words, he caught what Yun Jian meant and held his tongue. In the next second, he was overwhelmed by shock. From Yu Fengqing's perspective, no matter how capable Yun Jian was, there was no way she could lead Team Monarch to complete the mission successfully. Yu Fengqing was not the only one who thought so. Everyone in the Champ Squad and Flying Dragons Squad shared the same thought. The difficulty of this mission was highly valued by their superiors. The importance Gejun Jian placed on this mission could be seen from the fact that he deployed the 3 best squads in the military to complete the mission together. There was no doubt that even if the Champ Squad and the Flying Dragon Squad joined forces, they still couldn't find the slightest trace of the godly thief who had stolen the antique. How long had it been? Yun Jian said that Team Monarch had completed the mission? Little girl, are you kidding? A rough-looking man from the Champ Squad asked Yun Jian arrogantly. The tone of this person's voice was filled with an air of complete disbelief. I think this bunch of newbies from Team Monarch have never learned anything except to brag. If the mission this time was so easy, why did Officer Gu send us 3 squads to complete it? To play monkeys? Xiao Weiming had a fight with Chu Xiangnan early in the morning, so he was now unhappy with the rest of Team Monarch. Yu Fengqing thought the same when he heard what his own squad members said. Young people, it's good that you have a heart that's eager for success, but everything has to be done according to the facts. The mission this time isn't so easy. I saw that you guys went into the Tiandi Canyon and didn't find anything? I've said it before, we have to work together and work together. Yu Fengqing's long-winded words came one after another. However, Yu Fengqing and the others' intentions were clear. As for Yun Jian's claim that Team Monarch had found the antique, they remained unconvinced. Hey, you guys! When Chu Xiangnan heard this, he was also anxious. He opened his mouth to say something, but was stopped by Yun Jian. Since you want to enter the Heaven and Earth Grand Canyon, then go ahead. We won't accompany you. Yun Jian only said this one sentence before she led everyone away. The attitude of Yu Fengqing and his group disgusted Yun Jian, so she didn't even intend to say anything more. She directly called for Lu Shiyin and the others to leave with her. Seeing Yun Jian and the rest leave, Yu Fengqing stomped his feet in anger. He even shouted at Yun Jian and the rest. Young and hot-blooded, not knowing what's good for him. Since that's the case, we'll leave on our own. Yu Fengqing cursed in a low voice before leading his group into the Tiandi Grand Canyon. Yun Jian and her friends went back on their own and took the bus back. It was a long and bumpy ride before they finally made it back to Longmen City. After passing the jade pendant to Gejun Jian, it was announced that the mission was successfully completed once again. Gu Junjian was utterly shocked. He did not expect Yunjian and the others to return so soon. When he kept the jade pendant, he looked at Yunjian blankly and asked, "The mission is completed. What about the other 2 squads? They don't believe me, so they're still in country, eh?" Yunjian said to Gu Junjian with narrowed eyes. After a beat, Gu Junjian pressed his lips together, unable to say anything in the end. At this moment, Gu Junjian was deeply aware of something. Whether it was Team Monarch's mission completion time last time, or this time, it was telling Gu Junjian that Team Monarch had a bright future ahead of them. Yunjian's future achievements were definitely not something a mere Special Forces team could hold back. Yu Fengqing and the rest, on the other hand, had searched for half a month in the Tiandi Grand Canyon and turned the entire country upside down. But they could not find any trace of Peter the Godly Thief. It was only when Gu Junjian sent someone to bring them back that he told them that Yunjian had already brought the antique jade pendant back half a month ago. Yu Fengqing and the rest nearly vomited blood from anger. Chapter 390. Initially, she thought that Yunjian and the rest would be away for at least 10 days to half a month, and they might not even be able to make it back for the new year. However, her daughter was home in less than 2 days. Naturally, Qin Yiru breathed a sigh of relief. After all, going on a mission was risky. It was just the start of winter break, and there was still some time before the new year. The next evening, Qin Yiru went to the mall to buy some New Year goods after work. Qin Yiru had some savings now. Ever since she started working at New Cruise, the family was never short of money. Therefore, Qin Yiru bought more when she went shopping for New Year's goods. "Mom, I won't be having dinner at home today. You don't have to prepare a bowl and chopsticks for me," Yunjian told Qin Yiru. She stood in front of the door, put on a pair of white shoes and wrapped a scarf around her neck, and turned to pull the door open. Sure," Qin Yiru agreed. Yunjian pulled the door open, braving the bone-chilling wind outside, and walked out. Today, she wore a long down jacket that was long enough to cover her knees. She tied her hair into a high ponytail and wrapped the rest of her body in a scarf. Her lower body was a little simple. She only wore a pair of long johns, which was quite warm. After completing the mission yesterday to celebrate, Chu Xiangnan was the host. He invited all the members of Team Monarch and planned to treat them to dinner. After dinner, they even planned to go to karaoke. Their identity as Special Forces aside, Chu Xiangnan was actually a rich young master from a big family, and his family was extremely wealthy. Since he did not lack money since he was young, Chu Xiangnan was used to living a life of having everything taken care of. He was usually generous. In fact, Chu Xiangnan was the weakest in Team Monarch. As for why he was chosen, it was because Chu Xiangnan was forced into it by his father. He said that he wanted him to suffer in the army, so that he could change his arrogance. Before entering the Special Forces, Chu Xiangnan was a typical rebellious teenager. He hung out with a bunch of bad friends all day long, and often didn't return home at night. Therefore, in a fit of anger, Chu Xiangnan's father used his connections to get him into the Special Forces. He even told him that if he dared to go home without learning some skills, he would break his legs. It was Chu Xiangnan himself who told these things to everyone as if it was a joke. Yunjian braved the cold wind and walked out of the house. She turned a few corners and came to the entrance of an alley. At the entrance of the alley, Chu Xiangnan and the others were already stomping their feet as they waited for Yunjian. Seeing Yunjian walking over, Chu Xiangnan quickly waved and said, "Yunjian, you just came. Quick, quick, quick. Here, hurry up, I'm freezing." Yunjian followed Chu Xiangnan and the others. "I'll treat you guys to a feast today. Hee." Chu Xiangnan blew on the warm air and said to Yunjian and the others, "Don't give me that. What time is it? Hurry up, I'm starving." Chu Ning jumped up and slapped Chu Xiangnan's head. She ordered Chu Xiangnan in a domineering tone. Okay, let's go." Chu Xiangnan took the lead and led everyone to the location of the feast. Yunjian walked at the back. She pursed her lips, and her delicate little face was already red from the cold. The feast that Chu Xiangnan mentioned was a newly opened hotel. It didn't have a star rating, but the prices of the food inside were very expensive. This hotel was opened by a foreign country, and the owner was a foreigner. Chu Xiangnan brought Yun Jian and the others into the hotel. The lights at the main entrance of the hotel flickered, and a huge chandelier hung above. There were guests at all the tables on the first floor, and it looked like all the tables had been booked. It looked like someone was holding a banquet. Therefore, Chu Xiangnan planned to lead Yun Jian and the others directly to the second floor. Chapter 391. When Yun Jian heard the familiar voice that she had not heard for a long time, she turned around abruptly and saw Mayor Gu's smiling, mature face. Yun Jian nodded. Mayor Gu was pleasantly surprised to see Yun Jian here. He glanced at Yun Jian before an equally surprised voice rang out. "Uncle Gu." This shout came from Chu Xiangnan. At this moment, Chu Xiangnan was looking at Mayor Gu in shock. He was already standing at the top of the stairs, looking at Mayor Gu with his head tilted sideways in surprise. Mayor Gu glanced at Yun Jian before looking at Chu Xiangnan and the others behind Yun Jian. He asked Yun Jian, "Do you know each other?" "Yes, Uncle Gu. What are you doing here today?" Chu Xiangnan nodded to indicate that he indeed knew Yun Jian before he asked Mayor Gu a question. "I have a dinner appointment here, so I came over," Mayor Gu replied Chu Xiangnan in a friendly manner. Mayor Gu and Chu Xiangnan knew each other, because Chu Xiangnan's father was Mayor Gu's sworn brother. "Xiangnan, I didn't expect you to know this little girl too. Haha, I don't want to boast, but it's your good fortune to be able to hang out with this little girl." Mayor Gu praised him deeply the moment he opened his mouth. When they heard Mayor Gu praising this little girl, the group of people who were busy flattering Mayor Gu turned to look at them. "You flatter me." Yun Jian was not shy in front of everyone. She merely narrowed her eyes slightly before she replied. "Little girl, I think you're here for dinner too, right? We still have an empty table here. If you don't mind, why don't you join us?" Mayor Gu looked at Yun Jian and the others and invited them over. Sure. Come, let's join us." Before Yun Jian and the others could say anything, Chu Xiangnan hurriedly pushed them over. Hence, the group of people gathered around a table of food and wine on the first floor and sat down one by one. It was actually a big boss who was treating Mayor Gu to this meal. Since the big boss had a favor to ask of him, Mayor Gu did not hold himself back and invited Yun Jian and the rest of them on his own accord. There were over 20 tables of food on the first floor. The big boss had invited them to dinner today because his daughter had given birth to a 1-year-old son. Using this as an excuse, the big boss invited all his relatives to dinner. At the same time, he did not forget to use this opportunity to build connections and invite Mayor Gu as well. As all the people present were relatives of the big boss, some of the big boss relatives were unhappy with the sudden addition of Yun Jian and the others at the same table. After Mayor Gu invited Yun Jian and the others to the dinner, he was busy dealing with the toasts from the various people. Yun Jian and the others sat around a table. The table next to them was filled with young boys and girls of the same age as Yun Jian and the others. It was probably arranged by the adults on purpose for the children to sit around a table by themselves. Ever since Yun Jian and the others sat down, the young boys and girls beside them kept sizing up Yun Jian and the others and whispering to each other from time to time. Finally, a boy of about 17 or 18 years old at the next table stood up and walked over to Yun Jian. "Hey, how old are you?" The boy walked over to Yun Jian and spoke to her in an arrogant tone. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and ignored him. It was obvious that this boy was here to cause trouble. More importantly, she saw a familiar figure among the group of boys and girls at the table. It was a very familiar figure, because she had met her for the first time after her rebirth. Yun Jian still could not forget her. That person was Lin Mingyu. She was also the culprit who killed the original owner of this body. When Yun Jian walked over just now, she had already felt a burning gaze staring at her. She pretended not to see it. However, she had already noticed that the burning gaze that was sizing her up was avoiding her, not wanting her to notice her. Chapter 392. The one hiding behind the group of teenagers was indeed Lin Mingyu, who had caused the death of the original owner of the body. The big boss who was treating them was actually Lin Mingyu's relative. Ever since Lin Mingyu was severely injured by Yun Jian, she had asked her father to fire Yun Jian, but was slapped by her father instead, because Yun Jian had said something that made no sense. She then picked up a pen to stab Yun Jian in a fit of madness, only to be kicked away and relapse from her injury. Even her boyfriend, whom she had been longing for, Yuan Ingjun, had broken up with her because of Yun Jian. Lin Mingyu was utterly terrified of Yun Jian. Later, Lin Mingyu was hospitalized again due to relapse from her injury. By the time she came back with the intention of taking revenge on Yun Jian had already transferred to Longmen City. Today was Lin Mingyu's relative's wedding, and the banquet was held in Longmen City's best hotel. So Lin Mingyu insisted on tagging along. Not long after she sat down, however, she saw Yun Jian and her friends coming in as well. Panicking, she hid quickly, thinking that Yun Jian and the others would go up immediately. She did not expect to be stopped by Mayor Gu, and arranged to sit beside her table. Lin Mingyu suddenly remembered that her companions sitting around her were all capable people. She had wanted to seek revenge from her relative, but Yun Jian happened to come knocking on her door. Was Yun Jian not courting death? Hence, Lin Mingyu quietly called for the boy just now and told him to strike up a conversation with Yun Jian. It would be best if he could seduce Yun Jian and ask her out. Then, she could get someone to beat her up. Lin Mingyu hid behind her friend and was thankful that Yun Jian did not notice her. Little did she know that Yun Jian had already noticed her. The boy who stood in front of Yun Jian and wanted to strike up a conversation with Yun Jian was called Zhou Yuhao. Zhou Yuhao walked closer to Yun Jian and realized that she was very beautiful, so he couldn't help but gasp. He had come over to strike up a conversation with Yun Jian purely because of Lin Mingyu's request. Now that he had a clear view of Yun Jian's face, however, he had other thoughts. However, Yun Jian ignored him. Zhou Yuhao pursed his lips and moved closer to Yun Jian. However, he was stopped by Chu Xiangnan. However, Zhou Yuhao was not annoyed. He looked at Yun Jian with a smile and continued to strike up a conversation. Beauty, I don't mean any harm. I just want to take you out for a walk after dinner. It was obvious that Zhou Yuhao did not have good intentions when he tried to strike up a conversation with her. No, we're going to sing karaoke later. Chu Xiangnan stopped Zhou Yuhao from getting close to Yun Jian. He even helped Yun Jian to wave Zhou Yuhao away. F***ck, who are you to her? Why do you care so much? Zhou Yuhao was stopped by Chu Xiangnan. He suddenly felt that he had lost face. Especially in front of so many people, he felt that he had lost face. Why do you care so much about me? Chu Xiangnan was also a rebellious young man. Although he had restrained himself after staying in the military training camp for so long, Chu Xiangnan stopped someone like Zhou Yuhao out of kindness for Yun Jian. Who are you to her? Why do you care so much? Do you know who I am? I'm already a black belt in Taekwondo. Do you want to fight with me? Zhou Yuhao pointed at Chu Xiangnan's nose and shouted loudly. This shout attracted the attention of the people around them. However, Zhou Yuhao was proud of himself for saying this. He even felt Yun Jian's attention on him. He raised his head even more proudly. It was as if he was saying, I know Taekwondo and I'm good at fighting. Ha! Chu Xiangnan also slammed the table and stood up. He was about to fight with Zhou Yuhao when Yun Jian suddenly pulled him from behind. Yun Jian, you? Chu Xiangnan, including Chu Ning and the others, looked at Yun Jian in surprise. They did not understand what she meant. However, Yun Jian pulled Chu Xiangnan and said to Zhou Yuhao, Okay, let's go for a walk after dinner. Zhou Yuhao heard this and laughed. He glared at Chu Xiangnan provocatively. Chapter 393. No way. Yun Jian, are you really going to go out with him later? What about the karaoke we agreed on? Chu Xiangnan saw that Yun Jian had really agreed to Zhou Yuhao's request, and he was momentarily stunned. Then he pursed his lips and asked Yun Jian, Of course it's true. I don't know how to sing anyway, so I won't go to karaoke. Yun Jian smiled. She narrowed her eyes and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Zhou Yuhao, who was sitting opposite her, couldn't help but be stunned by her beauty once again. At this moment, Yin Jian was quiet and beautiful. She looked like a natural beauty. Her slightly narrowed eyes gave people an indescribable feeling. Chu Xiangnan wanted to say more, but he suddenly paused. He suddenly remembered that when Yun Jian had dealt with Peter, she had also narrowed her eyes and curled her lips like this. Could it be that Yun Jian was Chu Xiangnan suddenly thought of this? So he didn't say anything else. Everyone saw that Chu Xiangnan didn't say anything, so they pretended not to know anything. Lin Mingyu had been hiding behind her friends, and she was just out of Yun Jian's line of sight. When she heard that Yun Jian had agreed to Zhou Yuhao's request, her smile widened. After dinner, Mayor Gu walked over to bid farewell to Yun Jian. He laughed and asked Yun Jian to come back to his house as a guest next time. He even patted Chu Xiangnan's shoulder and asked him to bring Yun Jian to his house as a guest. After Mayor Gu left, Zhou Yuhao immediately walked over to Yun Jian and said, "Pretty girl, you just promised to walk around with me. Let's go now." As he spoke, Zhou Yuhao even glared at Chu Xiangnan, as if showing off his charm. Tisk! Chu Xiangnan cursed Zhou Yuhao in his heart, but he was secretly cursing him in his heart, waiting to see Zhou Yuhao cry. "Let's go." Yun Jian's hands were in the pockets of her long down jacket. She pursed her lips, narrowed her eyes, and curved her lips slightly. "Hee, let's go, let's go." Zhou Yuhao gave Chu Xiangnan another provocative look before he followed Yun Jian's path. Watching Yun Jian and Zhou Yuhao leave from afar, Chu Xiangnan, Chu Ning, and the others even saw Zhou Yuhao reach out to grab Yun Jian's hand. But Yun Jian evaded him, not even letting him touch the corner of her clothes. F***ck, what's wrong with Yun Jian? Chu Xiangnan watched Yun Jian leave, and couldn't help but complain. Shu. Chu Ning suddenly placed her index finger on her lips. She wanted Chu Xiangnan to keep quiet. What's wrong? Chu Xiangnan was stunned. He didn't know what was going on. At this moment, another group of people suddenly came out of the hotel. This group of people was the group of young men and women of the same age, who were sitting at the table beside them just now. After this group of people came out, they carefully chased after Yun Jian and Zhou Yuhao. When this group of young men and women disappeared in front of them, Chu Xiangnan smacked his head and said hatefully, F***ck, so they had a plan. So many people bullying one person, let's go. Let's go help Yun Jian kill them. Chu Xiangnan had an inexhaustible energy, and was especially loyal. When he saw so many people walking towards Yun Jian and Zhou Yuhao, he knew that the situation wasn't good. So he quickly ran over with Chu Ning and the others. On Yun Jian's side, Zhou Yuhao was walking side by side with her. Yun Jian kept a distance of 2 meters from Zhou Yuhao. Let's go through this alley to the opposite street and walk around, shall we? Zhou Yuhao brought Yun Jian to the designated deserted place. You decide. Yun Jian lowered her eyes. Her long eyelashes fluttered. Let's go. Zhou Yuhao watched as Yun Jian took the lead and walked into the deserted alley. He smiled slyly and quickly followed. When Lin Mingyu and the others reached the entrance of the alley, Yun Jian and Zhou Yuhao had already disappeared from everyone's sight. Hurry up and follow them, don't let them get away. Lin Mingyu whispered and led the group of people inside. However, even when they were about to pass through the alley and reach the opposite street, they still didn't see Yun Jian and Zhou Yuhao. What's wrong with Zhou Yuhao? Where is he? Where did he take her? Lin Mingyu shouted in exasperation. Lin Mingyu thought that with Zhou Yuhao's Taekwondo black belt, he could easily take care of Yun Jian. Are you looking for me? A soft female voice came from behind them. Lin Mingyu and the others turned around in fear and saw Yun Jian dusting her hands as if she was dusting them off. Then, Yun Jian was already standing behind them silently. Behind Yun Jian was Zhou Yuhao, who was tied up with hemp rope and had a rag stuffed in his mouth. Chapter 394. Zhou Yuhao. Lin Mingyu's hands trembled as she pointed at Zhou Yuhao, who was tied up, and screamed. Zhou Yuhao was tied up by Yun Jian. Zhou Yuhao was a black belt in Taekwondo. Other things aside, Zhou Yuhao's Taekwondo was at a whole new level. At the same time, he was also the strongest among Lin Mingyu's relatives. Zhou Yuhao's bones were strong since he was young. In addition, his family originally ran a martial arts school. Zhou Yuhao had been learning taekwondo, sanda, judo, and so on from his father since he was young. He could be said to be invincible since he was young. Therefore, Zhou Yuhao's skills were naturally at a level where there was nothing to complain about. Especially among his peers, Zhou Yuhao had not met many opponents since he was young. Therefore, he was called the taekwondo genius of the younger generation. Lin Mingyu obviously knew that Yun Jian had some skills. She had almost crippled herself with one kick. Therefore, Lin Mingyu let Zhou Yuhao deal with Yun Jian. It was all because of Zhou Yuhao's skills that he could suppress Yun Jian. After all, he was a black belt in the highest level of taekwondo. However, she did not expect that just as Yun Jian and Zhou Yuhao stepped into the alley, they immediately followed behind. In such a short period of time, Zhou Yuhao was tied up by Yun Jian silently. There was not even the slightest sound of struggle. Therefore, Lin Mingyu and the others were shocked and panicked. Especially Lin Mingyu. She had seen Yun Jian's methods. Because of Yun Jian, she was bedridden for God knows how many days. Several of her ribs and her abdomen were broken. Lin Mingyu saw Yun Jian looking at her from the corner of her eyes. She saw Yun Jian's narrowed eyes. Her deep eyes seemed to carry a sharp blade. Lin Mingyu screamed on the spot. Fear and panic instantly covered her mind. Run! Run! Lin Mingyu's intuition told her that she had to run. She had to run away from Yun Jian. Therefore, Lin Mingyu suddenly turned around. She even wanted to abandon the group of friends behind her and run away first. You want to run? Do you think you can still escape? Yun Jian suddenly broke into a smile. Her evil smile was faintly revealed, but when everyone saw it, they couldn't help but panic. Lin Mingyu ran for a while. Yun Jian crossed her arms in front of her chest. She didn't chase after her. Lin Mingyu hadn't even taken 5 steps before she was surrounded by Chu Xiangnan and the other 5 who had caught up from behind in groups of 3. At this moment, Jiang Weiwei stopped Lin Mingyu. Jiang Weiwei held a dagger in her hand and pointed it at Lin Mingyu, forcing Lin Mingyu to retreat. Hee. Yun Jian crossed her arms as she looked at the pale faces of Lin Mingyu and the others. She lifted her leg and moved closer to Lin Mingyu. Yun Jian was not surprised by the arrival of Jiang Weiwei and the others. This was because when they were having dinner at the hotel, she had secretly sent a message to Chu Ning, who was sitting on the other side of her. She had asked Chu Ning to lead the group and wait for Lin Mingyu and the others to follow her, and Zhou Yuhao to surround them from both sides of the alley. You, what are you trying to do? Sob. At this moment, Lin Mingyu was forced to take a few steps back by Yun Jian's aura. However, she realized that her back was facing the sharp blade in Jiang Weiwei's hand. She was so frightened that she screamed and started to cry without caring about her image. Yun Jian was unmoved. She only tilted her head slightly and looked at Lin Mingyu and the others. The corners of her beautiful mouth were slightly raised. Chapter 395. You want to kill me? Lin Mingyu was dumbfounded when she heard that. Her whole body began to tremble. Yun Jian wanted to kill her. Yun Jian wanted to kill her? No. You can't kill me. What you're doing is against the law. It's against the law. Lin Mingyu shrieked. Her voice was very sharp, and her screams sounded like the squeals of a pig being slaughtered. Your voice is very loud. Unfortunately, this is the alley you found. There's no one around. Even if you scream yourself hoarse, no one will hear you. Yun Jian said with a chuckle as she flipped her hand and pulled out the butterfly knife that she had been carrying with her. Then, while Lin Mingyu and the others were panicking, Yun Jian took a step forward. She threw the butterfly knife away and placed the blade on Lin Mingyu's neck. I wonder how beautiful it would be to cut open a throat that can make such a loud scream. Yun Jian slid the blade of the butterfly knife left and right on Lin Mingyu's neck, but she didn't let the blade go deep into Lin Mingyu's throat. Lin Mingyu's scream became softer and softer. She felt the coldness of the blade of the butterfly knife in Yun Jian's hand. She instantly felt as if she was wandering around in a hopeless situation. Yun Jian's seemingly lifeless eyes, that were akin to the king of hell, seemed to be sketching something. At this moment, Yunjian gave off the feeling that she was a fearless Grim Reaper. She didn't seem to be afraid of anything. She only existed to kill her. Lin Mingyu was walking on the edge of despair. It was her first time facing Yunjian like this. Right now, Yunjian was truly like the Grim Reaper who lured souls away from the underworld. I was wrong. Yunjian, let me go. Let me go. I beg you, sob. Lin Mingyu reached out and grabbed Yunjian's wrist that was holding the butterfly knife. She was so scared that she slowly knelt down in front of Yunjian. Let you go. Yunjian raised her eyebrows. Her low voice sounded even more terrifying. Yes, let me go. I beg you. I'm sorry, I promise you. I shouldn't have treated you like that in the past. Yunjian, please don't kill me on account that I didn't really do anything to you in the past. No. At this moment, Lin Mingyu had a premonition that if she persisted, Yunjian's butterfly knife would really slice her neck. You didn't do anything to me back then? When Yunjian heard this, she really wanted to laugh. The original owner had begged Lin Mingyu in the same way, begging her not to hit her, begging her not to bully her anymore. The original owner even swore to Lin Mingyu that she would not have anything to do with Lin Mingyu's boyfriend, Yuan Ingjun. But what about Lin Mingyu? She directly kicked the original owner unconscious, then punched and kicked her. In a moment of carelessness, he even kicked a vital point. In his despair, the original owner lost his will to live and died. No. Besides, I've already apologized to him. Yunjian, I was wrong. Lin Mingyu's voice was almost hoarse from shouting. She was now extremely regretful and scared. The butterfly knife was still stuck to her throat, motionless. Listen, the previous Yunjian is already dead. The Yunjian standing in front of you now can take your life at any time. Yunjian looked at Lin Mingyu's terrified expression and immediately laughed. Chu Xiangnan and the others took advantage of the time when Yunjian was dealing with Lin Mingyu to beat up Lin Mingyu's other helpers. Without formal training, it was impossible to achieve that kind of agility and nimbleness. When Chu Xiangnan thought of Zhou Yuhao who was showing off in front of him, he walked over with an evil smile and tore off the rag covering Zhou Yuhao's mouth. Little guy, do you have anything to say before you die? Chu Xiangnan looked at Zhou Yuhao with a smile. Who are you guys? Zhou Yuhao lost his voice and shouted. Why are Yunjian and the others so agile? They are like people from the military. Why? They are around the same age as me. Hey, let me tell you, we are special forces. Chu Xiangnan fiercely slapped Zhou Yuhao's head and said arrogantly. Then, Chu Xiangnan pointed at Yunjian and continued to say to Zhou Yuhao. Unfortunately, you provoked the most powerful one among us. Hee, she can kill 100 of you with one hand. Chapter 396. They were special forces. More importantly, Yunjian was the strongest among them? Zhou Yuhao stared at Yunjian and the others in a daze, fear and trepidation engulfing him. Special forces? Who were those people? They were people protected by the country. He couldn't move at all. And Yunjian and the girls were so young. No matter how hard Zhou Yuhao thought, he couldn't imagine that they were special forces at such a young age. No, you're lying. Yunjian, how could you be special forces? When you were in Xinjiang town, you were just a student. How could you be special forces? Lin Mingyu wasn't even afraid of the butterfly knife in Yunjian's hand when she heard that. She looked at Yunjian in shock and cried out again. When Yuan Ingjun and Lin Mingyu were dating, Yuan Ingjun fell in love with the previous host and kept pestering her. This caused Lin Mingyu to think that the previous host had seduced her boyfriend and beat her up. Of course, before this, Lin Mingyu had investigated the previous host's background. The previous host's background was simple. Even if she was beaten to death, she didn't have anyone backing her up. Her mother was just a worker in a textile factory, and her father was a gambler. After knowing this, Lin Mingyu gathered the two girls and brought the previous host to the toilet to beat her up. Now that she was suddenly told that Yunjian was a special forces member and the strongest one among them, how could Lin Mingyu believe it? No matter how much a person changed, it couldn't be that big, right? How is it not possible? F***K, shut up you bitch. Yun Jian, just give her a knife and see if she believes it or not. Chu Xiangnan slapped Zhou Yuhao's face harshly again. He turned to roar at Lin Mingyu, looking exactly like a ruffian. No. I believe. I believe. Lin Mingyu trembled when she heard that and quickly shouted. Whether you believe or not has nothing to do with me. All I want is your life. Yun Jian's lips curled into a smile. She twirled the butterfly knife in her hand, before stabbing it into Lin Mingyu's head. No. Lin Mingyu saw the butterfly knife in Yun Jian's hand coming down on her head. She screamed and closed her eyes, all the cells in her body screaming in fear. Not only Lin Mingyu, but even Zhou Yuhao and the others had all closed their eyes. Lin Mingyu's other relatives were all squatting on the ground in fear. Their roars and begging for mercy resounded through the sky. Swish! Just as everyone watched in horror as the butterfly knife in Yun Jian's hand plunged toward Lin Mingyu's head, a loud shriek rang out. Yun Jian suddenly narrowed her eyes. Her fierce pupils contracted, and then narrowed again. Even her pupils were emitting an unusual color. At the same time, Yun Jian suddenly retracted the butterfly knife in her hand. Just when Lin Mingyu thought that the knife was about to land in front of her, Yun Jian tossed it away abruptly, tossing it toward a visible pile of trash at the corner of the alley. Ping! Just as the butterfly knife was about to pierce through the pile of trash and fly to the back of the pile of trash, a pair of hands suddenly appeared. Everyone was dazzled. They saw a 16 or 17-year-old girl in black clothes suddenly stand up from behind the pile of trash. The girl in black clothes faced the butterfly knife. She dodged to the left and right, and then did a somersault in the air. Other than Yun Jian, no one at the scene expected someone to be hiding there. They were all shocked. After the girl in black clothes stood up straight, she looked at Yun Jian. Her expression suddenly became surprised. She went forward and greeted Yun Jian respectfully. Lan Su greets the sorcerer goddess. The black-clothed girl's shout shocked everyone. Chapter 397. The black-clothed girl who called herself Lan Su made Yun Jian and the others frown. Lin Mingyu had escaped death. Her face paled, and her eyelids rolled back. She fainted. As for Zhou Yuhao and the others, they looked at Lan Su in shock and fear. As for Chu Xiangnan and the rest, they too had turned their gazes towards the girl in the black dress. What did she call Yun Jian? Sorcerer goddess? What was that? Lan Su, who had suddenly appeared, was dressed in black. Her plain clothes accentuated her tall and slender figure. She was a classic beauty with thin eyebrows, long eyelashes, big eyes and fair skin. However, what was surprising wasn't Lan Su's appearance, but the fact that she was dressed in black. It was an ancient style, but the clothes she wore were different. The fabric on Lan Su's body was of the highest quality. Furthermore, her ancient black dress exposed her ankles. Chu Xiangnan looked at Lan Su in shock. At the same time, Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. The moment she saw Lan Su, an image popped into her head. However, when she thought about it carefully, she realized that she had never seen Lan Su before. Yet for some reason, she felt that this young girl, who called herself Lan Su, seemed to have met her before. Sorcerer goddess, don't you remember Lan Su? Seeing that Yun Jian didn't say anything, Lan Su took 2 steps towards Yun Jian. Her surprised expression was gradually replaced by disappointment. From the moment Lan Su appeared, she didn't even look at Chu Xiangnan and the others or Lin Mingyu, who was lying on the ground. Her pair of bright, beautiful eyes were fixed on Yun Jian. It was as if she was waiting for Yun Jian's answer. Yun Jian placed her hand on her forehead. She looked at Lan Su in front of her and paused. Then, she looked at her and shook her head. Should I know you? Yun Jian narrowed her eyes. She pursed her red lips and stared at Lan Su with her deep, playful eyes. Suddenly she became vigilant. It wasn't that Yun Jian thought too much. Just now, Lan Su had been hiding behind a pile of trash. She discovered her in time, and threw the butterfly knife at her. Lan Su had called her sorcerer goddess in a flash. Yun Jian had encountered this kind of familiar situation in her previous life. There were even assassins who used this method to attract her attention, in order to hide their identity and assassinate her. It was Yun Jian's first time meeting this girl, who called herself Lan Su. Even if she felt a sense of familiarity, she would not let her guard down. Yun Jian, when did you know such a beautiful girl? Why didn't you introduce her to me earlier? Hee. When Chu Xiangnan saw Lan Su, he was shocked by Lan Su's black clothes, her beautiful figure, and her beautiful face. He walked over and patted Yun Jian's shoulder. Chu Xiangnan used to be a typical hedonist, although he had restrained himself a little now. However, it was hard to change one's nature. Lan Su's appearance was completely different from Yun Jian's pure, clean, and exquisite face. Lan Su was tall and beautiful, while Yun Jian gave people a kind of pure and exquisite beauty. Yun Jian's beauty made people unable to take their eyes off her. Chu Xiangnan, are you stupid? Yun Jian already said that she doesn't know her. Chu Ning slapped Chu Xiangnan's shoulder hard. She pouted and shouted unhappily when she saw Chu Xiangnan paying so much attention to other girls. Lan Su didn't even look at Chu Xiangnan. She kept her eyes on Yun Jian. Finally, she was silent for a moment and took out something from her arms. She said to Yun Jian, "Sorcerer goddess, you don't remember me, but it's impossible that you don't recognize this. In this world, only you and the Lord Immortal can send it back." Yun Jian looked at the thing in Lan Su's hand, and her eyes narrowed. The sandalwood box. Wasn't the sandalwood box already in Yulong mainland? Chapter 398. If Lan Su didn't have the sandalwood box, then Yun Jian would be more or less cautious. After all, the girl in front of her had an unknown background, and Yun Jian couldn't be sure that she wasn't an assassin sent to assassinate her. Assassins and secret agents nowadays were very good at hiding, and Yun Jian never lacked the necessary vigilance towards strangers. However, Lan Su took out the sandalwood box. The sandalwood box. Yun Jian naturally remembered that the sandalwood box was placed by Ce in the ancient tomb, at the opposite end of the stone cave, that no one could pass through. It was a place that didn't belong to the real world. That place was called the Yulong continent, and it was a place that was completely different from the space they were living in now. Back then, there was only one entrance to the stone cave, and Yun Jian had experienced how powerful the mechanisms in that stone cave were. Normal people wouldn't be able to enter it. There were many people waiting for the stone door to open, but until now, no one had been able to wait for a year to enter through the stone door. Therefore, she could basically conclude that the girl in front of her, who called herself Lan Su, was from the Yulong continent. Back then, Ce had hidden the sandalwood box very well. If it wasn't someone from the Yulong continent, it would be impossible for them to discover the sandalwood box. Yun Jian pursed her red lips, but she couldn't help but look at the girl in front of her seriously. "I'm stupid. I'm not stupid. Go away. Don't get in the way of me getting to know pretty girls." Chu Xiangnan didn't hear the source of Chu Ning's anger at all. He even flicked Chu Ning's head and shouted. Then, Chu Xiangnan took advantage of the moment when Yun Jian was still in a daze to run over to Lan Su. He grinned and said, "Hey pretty girl, what sorcerer god monarch god?" Chu Xiangnan was an expert at flirting with girls, especially when it came to pretty girls who were to his liking. He would always think of ways to strike up a conversation. Lu Shiyin and the others facepalmed. They were no longer surprised by Chu Xiangnan's actions. Just as Chu Xiangnan wanted to slowly strike up a conversation with Lan Su glanced at Chu Xiangnan. She looked at Chu Xiangnan and said coldly, "Kid, get out of my way." Lan Su actually called Chu Xiangnan a kid? When Lu Shiyin and the others heard this, they all laughed maniacally. "Ha ha ha. Kid. Chu Xiangnan, you're a kid. Did you hear that? She called you a kid." Chu's face, Lan Su's face and Lan Su Lan's. In the face of everyone's laughter, Yun Jian was unmoved. She pursed her lips and looked at Lan Su. The cheerful atmosphere between Chu Xiangnan and the others was a stark contrast to Yun Jian and Lan Su. Chu Xiangnan and the others quickly quieted down. Yun Jian, on the other hand, looked at Lan Su and finally said slowly, "Let's talk somewhere else." Since it was related to the sandalwood box, Yun Jian couldn't speak in front of Chu Xiangnan and the others and Lan Su. "What's the matter? You don't have to be so secretive, do you?" Chu Xiongnan shouted after hearing this. As soon as Chu Xiongnan finished speaking, Chu Ning gave him a headbutt. You two go ahead. We'll stand here and wait for you. Lu Shiyan was smart, and he gestured to Yun Jian. Okay. Yun Jian nodded and then said, if you can't wait, you guys can go first. After saying that, she called Lan Su to go with her to talk alone. Yun Jian chose a quiet coffee shop nearby. After ordering a cup of coffee, the two of them sat across from each other. Chapter 399. In the coffee shop, Lan Su's strange clothes attracted the attention of the people around her. However, most people's gazes only lingered on her for a short while before they moved on. Yun Jian asked Lan Su in a very soft voice. It was so soft that no one could hear her. When she asked, Yun Jian stretched out her hand and tapped her fingernails on the table twice. She pursed her lips and her eyes moved slightly. Her posture was extremely lazy. When Lan Su saw Yun Jian's behavior, she felt that she was very similar to the sorcerer goddess. Moreover, Lan Su found Yun Jian by following her scent. The reason why she hid behind the trash was to confirm whether Yun Jian was the sorcerer goddess of the Wu clan. At first Lan Su wasn't sure. However, when Yun Jian discovered her movements and flew over with a butterfly knife, she was overjoyed when she narrowly dodged it. Lan Su's abilities were definitely strong, not to mention the earth where humans lived. Even in the Yulong mainland, where there were many strong people, Lan Su's abilities were definitely one of the best. Since Yun Jian could discover her whereabouts, it meant that her abilities were definitely above hers. Yun Jian, who had the sorcerer goddess's scent and skills, was definitely the sorcerer goddess. Lan Su didn't say anything. Instead, she took out the sandalwood box and pushed it in front of Yun Jian. Then, she said to Yun Jian, sorcerer goddess, this sandalwood box is your magical weapon. Lan Su's words stunned Yun Jian. Yun Jian pointed at herself. Then her red lips moved. She said in surprise, the sandalwood box is mine? Yes, this is your item. Because of the words you left behind, the sorcerer clan has been waiting for you for thousands of years. Lan Su's tone became more and more excited. In the end, she actually stood up in excitement. Because Lan Su stood up excitedly, and because she was wearing an ancient costume, some of the customers in the coffee shop who were enjoying their tea turned their attention to her. Yun Jian hurriedly gestured for her to sit down. After Lan Su sat down, some of the people who were looking at Lan Su strangely turned back. What words? Yun Jian picked up the coffee and sniffed it. She blew on the coffee in enjoyment and took a sip. Lan Su had already calmed down. She looked at Yun Jian and said firmly, I will definitely return after 1,000 years. From Lan Su, Yun Jian heard a lot of things that were completely different from what she usually knew. Lan Su said that she was the sorcerer goddess after their reincarnation. Lan Su said that she was the first guardian of the sorcerer god of Yulong continent's Wu clan. As for the existence of the sorcerer god, there was a very accurate saying. This was also an ancient prophecy that had been passed down since ancient times. The Wu clan. As long as the sorcerer god was alive, the sorcerer clan would be at peace forever. When the sorcerer god died, the sorcerer clan would be destroyed. Reality proved that after the sorcerer god left, the Wu clan gradually declined. From being the first clan of Yulong continent 1,000 years ago, they could not even maintain their status as a clan. However, none of the clansmen gave up waiting for the sorcerer god's return. This was because the sorcerer god had said that she would definitely return after 1,000 years. Everyone believed that the sorcerer god's return would be the time for the sorcerer clan to rise to its peak. Sorcerer god, thank you for leaving the crystal ball behind. You also left a statement that when the crystal ball breaks, it will be the time for you to return. Because of this, I was able to sense your return and find you. Lan Su explained everything in one breath. So you want to bring me to Yulong continent? Yun Jian raised her eyebrows and asked. Lan Su raised her eyebrows slightly. She nodded vigorously and said, of course. Only if you return with me will the sorcerer tribe have a chance to rise again. Chapter 400. Why? Lan Su was stunned. She shouted excitedly, but her face was filled with confusion and disappointment. There's no reason. It's because I have my own life. Yin Jian placed the coffee on the table. She pursed her lips, and her eyes were filled with complicated emotions. Yulong Continent. The old man who had helped her in her previous life was also there. However, Yun Jian would not go there, at least not in the near future. Her family and all the people she cared about were there. So Yun Jian did not plan to leave. Is that so? Lan Su lowered her eyes in disappointment. After a while, she raised her head again and looked at Yun Jian with a determined gaze. Sorcerer Goddess, whether you're willing to go back with me or not, please allow me to stay by your side. Lan Su doesn't want to leave you again. As the first guardian of the Sorcerer Goddess, Lan Su had finally found Yun Jian after much difficulty. Naturally, she was unwilling to leave. It's up to you, Yun Jian said lazily. Then, she pushed the sandalwood box back to Lan Su. Keep this for now. Yun Jian knew how eye-catching the sandalwood box was. Back then, her younger brother had been caught and lost his life because of the sandalwood box. Yun Jian did not want to take any more risks. Since Lan Su was from the Yulong continent, returning the sandalwood box to Lan Su was the best way to deal with this. Also, if you want to stay by my side in the future, don't call me Sorcerer Goddess. Yun Jian grinned. Then, she smiled and revealed her white teeth to Lan Su. My name is Yun Jian. Yes. Lan Su understood that Yun Jian allowed her to follow her. She smiled and nodded at Yun Jian. Let's go. They must have waited for a long time. After the conversation, Yun Jian stood up. She paid the bill and left the cafe with Lan Su. They were naturally Lu Shiyan and the others. Yun Jian knew that Lu Shiyan and the others would not leave. As for why Yun Jian left Lan Su behind, this was probably due to his intuition. Lan Su from the Yulong continent gave Yun Jian a sense of déjà vu. However, Yun Jian could not describe this feeling. She just felt that it was familiar, and there was no sense of alienation. In addition, the sandalwood box that Lan Su had taken out earlier was enough to prove that she was from the Yulong continent. This could not be false. Moreover, a person's eyes could speak for themselves. Lan Su's eyes told her that she wasn't lying. After Lan Su and Yun Jian got up and left the coffee shop, they heard a child's naughty voice behind them. Hey Mom, why is that big sister wearing such strange clothes? The child's mother touched the child's head and lectured. She's probably a lunatic. Baby, you can't learn from her in the future. By then, Yun Jian and Lan Su had left the cafe and were walking towards the alley. Yun Jian, you're back? What should we do with these people? Lu Shiyan and the others came up and asked Yun Jian. Lin Mingyu had fainted while Zhou Yuhao was still tied up and trembling. Kill them and bury them. Yun Jian raised her eyebrow. No, we won't do it again. It's all Lin Mingyu's fault. She ordered us to do it. It's not my fault. The group panicked. Especially when Yun Jian really did stab Lin Mingyu in the head with a knife. She was a woman of her word, even though she did not hurt her in the end. Teach them a lesson. Lu Shiyan also noticed that Yun Jian did not really want to kill the group. He was smart enough to tell the rest of Team Monarch. In the end, it was Chu Xiangnan who came up with an idea. He went to buy a marker pen and drew a tortoise on everyone's back. He asked them to wear it when they went home, or else they would be taught a lesson. Chu Xiangnan's method was a complete embarrassment to these people. Chapter 401. She believed that this lesson would be etched in her memory for the rest of her life. Yun Jian brought Lan Su to buy a few sets of modern clothes. Lan Su's black outfit that resembled an ancient costume was too eye-catching on the streets. There were not many actors in this era, and movies were not as popular as they were now. After all, it was rare to see a television set at home in 1998, let alone a color TV. Back then, the average monthly income of a citizen was only a few hundred yuan, and a TV set would cost at least a few thousand yuan to buy. Some people had to save up their salary for about half a year before they could buy a color TV set. Of course, No one was dumb enough to save up their salary without eating or drinking for a few months, just to buy a color TV. After all, food, shelter, and transportation were the most basic survival principles under the premise of enjoying entertainment. Therefore, Lan Su's getup looked like a lunatic to others. Not many people would think of Lan Su as an actress. Great sorcerer goddess. A Yin Jian. Where am I staying tonight? Lan Su almost blurted out the words great sorcerer goddess, in a moment of carelessness. Since they were on the crowded street, Lan Su was quick to correct herself, so her words were choked in the cradle before she could utter them. Lan Su was older than Yin Jian, so she would not call Yin Jian Sister Jian. Moreover, Lan Su looked like she was only 16 or 17 years old, but she had lived for at least a few thousand years. Yin Jian knew this as well, because Lan Su had admitted it herself. Lan Su had also told Yin Jian, before, that people in Yulong mainland could easily live up to a few thousand years, as long as they cultivated. More importantly, there was a sacred spring in Yulong mainland. If humans used the sacred spring to wash away their impurities, they could cultivate like the people of Yulong mainland and live for more than a few thousand years. It was unfortunate that the sacred spring was long gone. Since tens of thousands of years ago, not a single human had stepped foot into the Yulong mainland. Yin Jian and Ce, as well as Ce's subordinates, Adam and Emo Sun, broke this record. I'll find someone to arrange a place for you. Yin Jian pursed her lips and said. After she finished speaking, she took out her phone and called Zhang Jifan's new phone. Beep, beep, beep. The phone rang 3 times. Zhang Jifan answered it on time. Hello, Sister Jian? Zhang Jifan's honest, middle-aged voice came from the phone. This thing could actually make a sound. Lan Su couldn't help but take a few more glances. In the Yulong continent, such high-tech products did not exist. However, Lan Su's tolerance was not bad. She had gradually accepted the new technology of the human world. She was just not used to it yet. Arrange a deluxe suite. It must be the best and most comfortable one. Stay there for the long term, Yin Jian said into the phone. Zhang Jifan, who was on the other end of the phone, was stunned before his voice came again. Okay, Sister Jian. Yin Jian hung up. Not long after that, the phone beeped with a message notification. Yin Jian looked up and saw that it was from Zhang Jifan. The address on it was the accommodation he had found. After Yin Jian arranged Lan Su's accommodation and settled her there, she went to Qingyu's place. Qingyu's residence was a complete suite with top-notch interior decoration. Qingyu had saved up quite a lot of money after following Yin Jian all these years. Yin Jian was going to look for Qingyu this time to tell her. 3 days later, she would return to the kosher mercenaries with her. Before this, Yin Jian had already contacted Snake Lizard. 3 days later, she would return to the kosher mercenaries and eliminate them. Dong. Yin Jian had just knocked on Qingyu's door when the door was pushed open. Unlocked. Yin Jian went in directly, but just as she opened the door, Yin Jian saw a familiar figure. On the sofa in the living room, Yuni was pinning Qingyu down on the sofa with her elbow propped up, both of them in an extremely awkward position. Yin Jian was speechless. Chapter 402. More importantly, Yuni was currently pinning Qingyu down on the sofa in a bashful manner. It was a scene that made one's imagination run wild. Ah, what are you doing? Get off me. Qingyu's back was facing Yin Jian, so she did not notice Yin Jian. She must have been pinned down by Yuni just now, so she blushed in embarrassment and pushed Yuni away quickly. Yuni sprang up as well, not expecting himself to accidentally fall towards Qingyu. He even accidentally fell on top of her. In spite of it, the scene was different in Yin Jian's eyes. Yin Jian squinted and took a closer look, thinking that her brother, Yuni, and Qingyu did look like a married couple. Yuni stood up awkwardly from Qingyu and glanced at the door, noticing that it was open from the corner of his eye. Once again he fixed his eyes on the door, and his heart, which had always been calm since he was a child, almost jumped out of his chest in fright. Xiao Jian, why are you here? Yuni thought about the awkwardness just now, and how Yin Jian was looking at him, and Qingyu with her arms crossed. It looked like she had been standing there for quite some time. Yuni was so embarrassed that he almost had no face left. He ran a hand through his hair, his cheeks flushing red like two clouds. I'd like to ask why you're here. Yunjian suddenly had the urge to tease Yuni. Looking at how flustered Yuni was, Yunjian felt like she had never seen her brother like this before. Yunjian suddenly recalled how Zhang Xiaofeng and her brother had come to her one morning to ask for Qingyu's address after training them. She recalled how her brother was drugged by Chen Yubing and ended up lying on the same bed with Qingyu out of the blue, hugging each other naked. Yunjian's hand that was crossed over her chest suddenly stroked her chin. She narrowed her eyes at Yun-Yi and Qingyu with a subtle smile. Xiao Jian, it's not what you think. I really didn't do anything to her. Yun-Yi ran his fingers through his hair and stuttered as he explained to Yunjian. I didn't think too much. Yunjian forbade herself from teasing Yun-Yi. She chuckled and walked in to snatch Qingyu's sofa to sit beside the latter, who had her head lowered and buried in her knees in embarrassment. Suddenly, Yunjian stretched her hand, unable to resist teasing Qingyu and peeking over to look at her. It was rare for her to be so expressive, as she called out to Qingyu with a giggle. Sister-in-law. The term sister-in-law sent a shiver down Qingyu's spine. Slaying God, the top secret agent in the international ranking, the chief boss of kosher mercenaries, was calling her sister-in-law? Sister Jian, don't tease me. Qingyu kept her head down. There was a smile on her lips, but her cheeks were flushed. All right, I'll stop teasing you guys. Yunjian smiled and stood up to turn to look at Qingyu, telling her, go back with me in 3 days. The destination was none other than the headquarters of kosher mercenaries. Yunjian's words made Qingyu's rosy smile fade as she nodded at Yunjian. Go back where? Yuni was baffled. To travel. It's winter break now. I'm bringing my future sister-in-law out to have some fun, but I'm not bringing you, Ge. Yunjian smiled at Yun-Yi. Her smile was mesmerizing. Chapter 403. Qingyu and Yun-Yi, on the other hand, were blushing. Their rosy and fair faces were indescribable with words. It was only after Qingyu made sure that Yunjian had left that she snapped out of it and pushed Yun-Yi, mumbling. Why did you do that to me just now? Sister Jian even saw it. Qingyu shoved Yun-Yi angrily and turned to face him with a pout, no longer watching the Calabash brothers on the TV. I just slipped. I didn't expect to fall on you, Yun-Yi said awkwardly as he rubbed his nose, feeling a little bitter at the same time. Humph, I'm ignoring you. Go. I won't be able to face Sister Jian if she sees me again, Qingyu said as she turned to give Yun-Yi a light pat on his back. In spite of it, her tone sounded like a girl's whining to Yun-Yi. Yun-Yi's brow was raised to its peak while he squinted his eyes, looking extremely pleased. Especially when Yunjian called Qingyu sister-in-law, just now, he felt like he was on cloud 9. It was inexplicably exhilarating. I'm leaving then. Yun-Yi stood up with a smirk, a sly grin spreading across his face. When Yun-Yi reached the door, he suddenly turned back to tell Qingyu, who was ignoring him sulkily. I'm leaving. Tonight's dinner is in the stove. Remember to eat and tidy up the house. A girl's house can't be so messy. If I'm not here to tidy up for you next time, eat on time. Don't forget to eat, because you're watching Calabash Brothers all day. As he spoke, Yun-Yi pretended to leave. Yun-Yi went to the door. He gave his silent permission for 3 seconds before Qingyu's voice came from behind him. Wait, you're not coming anymore? Yun-Yi's back was facing Qingyu. He suddenly smirked and turned around, the smile vanishing instantly. Yun-Yi looked at Qingyu and said with a straight face, That's right, didn't you ask me to leave? Then I'll take my leave. Qingyu pouted and looked at Yun-Yi. She bit her lip and said to Yun-Yi, Then you better not leave. He had been looking for her ever since Yun-Yi tidied up her room that day. Qingyu had been quietly accepting Yun-Yi's kindness. Today, Yun-Yi had prepared dinner for her and accompanied her to watch Calabash Brothers. She did not expect that he would slip and fall onto the sofa. Coincidentally, Yunjian, who had suddenly come over, saw the scene. Yun-Yi smirked at Qingyu's words. He already knew this would happen. Yun-Yi then walked over to Qingyu. Yunjian left Qingyu's house and went home. It had been a few days since she last saw Ce, and she could not help missing him. In spite of it, he seemed to have returned to the organization, because Adam and Emo's son were nowhere to be seen. They had probably followed him back. Just as she got home, she saw Qinyiru. "Xiaojian, you're back?" Qinyiru asked Yunjian with a grim look. Yunjian nodded and asked when she saw Qinyiru's odd expression, "Mom, what's wrong?" Qinyiru answered directly, "Xiaojian, do you remember your best friend Lu Fian from Xinjiang town? Just now, I ran into a fellow villager from Xinjiang town when I was shopping at the market. I heard from her that something happened to your friend Lu Fian's family. When her father went to the school to help, he accidentally dropped a long pole from the 3rd floor, and it stabbed a student to death. The student's parents sent her father to jail and forced Fian to drop out of school. They even said that if Fian dared to go back to school in the future, she would pay for her father's life and stab her to death too." Chapter 404. Qinyiru's tone was laced with a deep sigh and helplessness. She had bumped into her hometown friend when she went to the market to buy groceries at night, and chatted excitedly before her friend brought it up. In the end, he asked the poor girl who she was from Xinjiang town. He would not have known if he did not ask, but when he did, he was shocked. Her hometown friend told Qinyiru right away that the poor girl who had suffered for nothing was called Lu Fian. Lu Fian. Qinyiru was stunned when she heard it. Lu Fian was her daughter's best friend in Xinjiang town. Moreover, Lu Fian often came to her house to look for her daughter, Yunjian. Qinyiru and Lu Fian had met each other many times as well, especially when Lu Fian treated him so politely. She was a very good girl. Qinyiru panicked when she heard it. She was such a good girl. How could she have met with such a sinner? Considering Xiaojian and Lu Fian's relationship, Qinyiru had been frowning ever since she got home. Since Yunjian asked, she told her directly. In spite of it, Qinyiru knew that she could not help with such matters, because she was not a high-ranking official. She could only shake her head and sigh. When Yunjian first heard Qinyiru's words, her eyelids twitched. The image of Lu Fian rebutting the teacher for her, when she had just been reborn, surfaced in Yunjian's mind. There was also the encounter with the cobra in the park. The last thing the silly girl did in her panic was to block the cobra's attack for her. Later on, the girl promised her that they would enroll in the same high school together. Although Yunjian had returned to Xinjiang town to visit Lu Fian, her stay was short. In spite of it, Lu Fian's figure lingered in her mind. Lu Fian was Yunjian's first friend after her rebirth, so it meant a lot to her. "Xiaojian. Xiaojian. Xiaojian, what's wrong? Did you hear what Mom said to you?" Qinyiru waved her hand in front of Yunjian's eyes. She thought that Yunjian was stunned by the sudden news, so she quickly asked. Yunjian snapped back to reality. She looked up at Qinyiru and asked, Nothing. Mom, what did you just say?" "Xiaojian, go back to the village tomorrow and check on Fian. Here's 2,000 yuan, bring it to her too. I'm not capable, I can only help her a little." Qinyiru pulled out a cowhide envelope out of nowhere and stuffed the bulging envelope into Yunjian's hand. This 2,000 yuan was all of Qinyiru's salary that she had saved up since she started working. Other than the meager living expenses that she had to spend, Qinyiru had put almost all of her savings into this leather envelope. This was Qinyiru's token of appreciation. Yunjian nodded and accepted the envelope. Since Lu Fian's family was in such a big mess, Yunjian had to go back no matter what. A friend that Yunjian had set her mind on would never change. The next morning, Yunjian boarded the bus back to Xinjiang town before the sun had even risen. She was carrying a simple backpack. This backpack was already a little shabby. Even the color of the backpack was the kind that couldn't be more faded after being washed. The cowhide envelope that Qinyiru gave her was in the backpack. Chapter 405. Yunjian had been to Lu Fian's house several times before. Lu Fian's family background was one of the best in Xinjiang town. Both of his parents were retired teachers, and every month, he received a decent amount of pension. Therefore, Lu Fian's house was beautifully decorated. At least compared to the houses in the village, it was one of the most outstanding houses. In the past, when Yun Jian came to Lu Fian's house, it was always clean and tidy. However, it was a mess outside the house now. Taking a closer look, Yun Jian saw many bright red words painted in red. They were scrawled on the walls around Lu Fian's house. A life for a life, right and proper. You killed my son. Give me back my son's life. What kind of teachers are you? Go to hell. This originally white and unadorned outdoor wall was now covered by a pile of curses written in red. Even passers-by could tell that these words were written by the family's enemies. Yun Jian knew the details. She immediately understood that these words were written by the students' parents who were accidentally stabbed to death by Lu Fian's father. Yun Jian's eyes darkened. She carried her backpack and stood in front of Lu Fian's house. Reaching out, Yun Jian knocked on the door. No one answered. Yun Jian raised her hand again and knocked. Young lady, you're here to look for this family, right? An old lady's voice suddenly came from behind. Yun Jian turned around and saw an old lady in her 70s or 80s standing behind her. She was even holding a stove for warmth. Yun Jian nodded. She frowned, feeling slightly uneasy. They've gone to the police station. Young lady, go to the police station and look for them. Sigh, what a sin. After the old lady said that, she shook her head and sighed softly. She turned around and left with the stove. The old lady had only come over to remind Yun Jian out of kindness. With this reminder, Yun Jian immediately knew what was going on. Lu Fian and her mother could not sit still when Lu Fian's father was already locked up in Xinjiang Town's police station. It was reasonable for Lu Fian and her mother to go to the police station. Thankfully, Xinjiang Town's police station was not far from here. Yun Jian carried her backpack and walked there in no time. In the waiting room of the police station, Yun Jian saw Lu Fian and her mother. Lu Fian had lost a lot of weight. She looked pale and weak, and her hair was messy as if she hadn't combed it for days. She sat on the chair in the waiting room, staring at the floor in silence with her mother. It wasn't until Yun Jian came in front of LV Fian and showed her the shoes that LV Fian raised her head to take a look. Then she saw Yun Jian. Xiao Jian. Lu Fian pressed her pale lips together and called out softly as tears streaked down her cheeks. Yun Jian walked over and hugged Lu Fian's frail body. She reached out and patted Lu Fian's back. This was the only way to comfort her. More tears flowed down Lu Fian's cheeks. Her mother, who stood beside her, was like a weeping doll, staring blankly at the floor without a sound. When Lu Fian recovered, Yun Jian helped her to a seat far away from her mother. Lu Fian then cried and told her about what she had been through these few days. Lu Fian's father was invited by the principal to help out in school that day. He was a retired teacher after all, and Lu Fian's father was getting on in years. Chapter 406. As the principal of the school that Lu Fian's father had been in for half his life was a distant relative of hers, Lu Fian's father was too embarrassed to reject and went. In the end, a tragedy happened. When Lu Fian's father was helping to move a long pole, he was accidentally bumped into by someone on the third floor. The pole slipped, and he fell from the window on the third floor. A classmate happened to pass by downstairs, and the pole pierced through the classmate's head, killing him on the spot. The person who bumped into Lu Fian's father and caused the pole to fall from the third floor was a young teacher with the surname Su. When this teacher Su saw the incident, he refused to admit that he had bumped into Lu Fian's father. He even stood up and said that Lu Fian's father was careless and caused the tragedy. That distant relative, the principal of the school, was also unwilling to clarify the matter after seeing the incident. The result was that Lu Fian's father was to blame for all of this. Lu Fian also said that after the incident, Lu Fian's father was arrested and sent to the police station. The parent of the classmate who was killed had been making a fuss. That classmate's parent even held a kitchen knife and did not allow Lu Fian to go to school. He said that if Lu Fian dared to go to school, he would chop her to death for her father's debt. Therefore, Lu Fian had been staying at home for the past few days looking haggard. When a person really needed help, Those who could lend a helping hand were truly people worth befriending. Just then, a male police officer in uniform suddenly walked out of the police station. Lu Fian and her mother stood up. This case hasn't been solved yet. Our chief said that you're not allowed to visit relatives. You should leave first. The male police officer waved at Lu Fian and her mother and turned to leave. Police officer, I beg you. Help us, just let us take a look, just one look, okay? Lu Fian's mother, who had been silent all this while, suddenly sprung up like a spring. She rushed forward and grabbed the male police officer's hand as she begged humbly. Go away, go away. I said no means no. Unless you get the higher-ups to sign off, you're not allowed to enter. The male police officer waved his hand impatiently. Lu Fian was anxious as she watched, tears streaming down her face. She and her mother had been waiting here for a long time. Ever since Lu Fian's father was sent to the police station, they had not seen him once. The reason given by the police station was that the case was not solved yet. As long as the higher-ups sign off, we can visit? Just as the male police officer impatiently pushed Lu's mother, Lu Fian's mother, a female voice was heard. The police officer was taken aback before he saw Yun Jian, who was making her way over slowly. Thinking that he was an honorable police officer, he looked up at Yun Jian with a lowered gaze and nodded. That's right, as long as the higher-ups give their approval. Yun Jian pressed her lips together and slid her backpack down, grabbing it in her palm. What are you doing? Comms. Loses. Of course. To S. It. Of Lu. 2. With one look, he was instantly dumbfounded. Yun Jian's name and gender were written on the top of the document. Below it was a note, Advanced Special Forces official member. There was another note, Advanced Special Forces highest officer, personally issued by Gu Junjian. This document. The male police officer was dumbfounded. He looked at Yun Jian and was speechless, his teeth chattering. You're an Advanced Special Forces soldier? Officer Ji's Advanced Special Forces soldier? That's the top force in the country. How old was she? She was actually a member of the Advanced Special Forces. The male police officer's jaw almost fell off. Chapter 407. Yun Jian had actually become an Advanced Special Forces soldier? When did she become an Advanced Special Forces soldier? Lu Fian was dumbfounded. Even Lu Fian's mother, who had been in a daze all this while, lifted her eyes and looked at Yun Jian in shock. The male police officer was dumbfounded. His hand that was holding the ID trembled, as if he had seen something incredible. Other things aside, Yun Jian's document was definitely not forged. More importantly, Gu Yunjian's Advanced Special Forces was the top force in the country. Moreover, all members of the Advanced Special Forces had special privileges in Country Z. With the document personally stamped by Gu Junjian, it meant that Yun Jian's status was much higher than that of the male police officer's position in the police station. At the same time, as long as the Advanced Special Forces soldiers had this document, they could be considered as having been sent by their superiors to carry out missions. In other words, no matter where the Advanced Special Forces soldiers went to in Country Z, as long as they were in Country Z, they had the right to get the local police station to cooperate with them. Yun Jian had such special privileges. This was also one of the main reasons why Yun Jian had joined the Advanced Special Forces back then. This document was given to Yun Jian by Gu Junjian not long after she and the others had completed their first mission. The male police officer had gone from being arrogant earlier to trembling slightly now. His gaze towards Yun Jian had changed, changing his arrogant attitude from earlier when he thought he was a police officer. The male police officer took 2 steps towards Yun Jian. He suddenly flashed a smile, as if he was flattering his superior, and returned Yun Jian's document to her. So now, can we allow them to visit their relatives? Yun Jian took her document back from the male police officer's hand and smiled. The male police officer quickly nodded like a rattledrum. His attitude had changed a little too quickly. He even pointed at the prison beside them and said, "Please, please, I'll bring you there now." The change in the policeman's attitude shocked Lu Fian and her mother. Ever since Lu Fian's father was arrested, Lu Fian and her mother had been coming to the police station every day to plead with them to let them see Lu Fian's father. However, the people at the police station did not allow it. They even used the reason that Father Lu was a murderer and said that they were not allowed to visit before the case was solved. This cycle had been going on for a long time. Just as Lu Fian and her mother were about to give up hope that the police would allow them to visit Father Lu, Yun Jian appeared. Moreover, Yun Jian merely took out a certificate, and the male police officer immediately changed his attitude. He did not even ask the chief, and directly brought them to visit Father Lu. This piece of news was undoubtedly the best news that Lu Fian and her mother had heard since the incident. Xiao Jian, thank you. Thank you. Lu Fian looked at Yun Jian with tears in her eyes. She hugged Yun Jian again and thanked her gratefully. Go on, I'll wait for you outside. Yun Jian patted Lu Fian's back and told her softly. Amen. Lu Fian nodded fervently and held her mother's hand to follow the male police officer to the prison. Yun Jian did not follow them in. She stood outside and waited for a while. About an hour later, she saw Lu Fian helping her mother out with tears streaming down her face. Have you seen him? Yun Jian asked Lu Fian, looking at her mother who was in tears. Chapter 408. Yun Jian took in Lu Fian's reaction as well. She knew the girl's pain, so she did not say much. No one would feel good if they were to encounter such an incident. Moreover, although Lu Fian's father did not kill on purpose, he had killed someone by accident. Even if he did not deserve death, he would be sentenced to life imprisonment based on the current situation. Lu Fian's family, in particular, had no power or influence other than not living in poverty. It was said that the father of the student whom Lu Fian's father stabbed was a prominent figure in Xinjiang town, and even in Longmen City. Not only was he rich, but he was also powerful. It was not hard to guess that the reason why the police did not allow him to visit his family after Lu Fian's father was imprisoned was probably because the parent who was stabbed by Lu Fian's father had taken over the police force. Take Auntie home to rest for a bit, Yun Jian told Lu Fian when she saw that Lu Fian's mother was not in good condition, and went over to help her. Amen. Lu Fian nodded and repeated her earlier words gratefully. Xiao Jian, thank you. I really have to thank you today. If it wasn't for you, Mom and I wouldn't have been able to see Dad. At the mention of her father, who was still suffering in prison, and whose aged face had obviously lost a lot of weight, LV Fian felt as if she was at a loss for words. Lu Fian's father was a righteous man, who was always willing to help others. After he retired, he would gladly oblige any acquaintances who asked him for help. He was quite kind. Sometimes, though, kind-hearted people got into trouble easily. Lu Fian's father was exactly like that. After the incident, the principal who asked Lu Fian's father for help and teacher, Su, who bumped into him and caused his bamboo pole to slide down from the third floor, had both gone into hiding out of fear of trouble. Therefore, Lu Fian's father shouldered all the responsibility. Yun Jian patted Lu Fian's back and helped her mother up to make their way to the Lu family. Clang, 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 clang. On the way back to the LV family, there was only one more turn before they reached the LV family's residence. Quang, quang, quang. The sound of someone knocking on the door was suddenly heard. The voice came from the Lu family. Lu Fian's mother shuddered. Lu Fian's face also turned pale. Lu Fian's mother quickened her pace and ran towards the door. Although Yun Jian didn't know why, she suddenly remembered the words that were scrawled in red paint on the surrounding mud walls outside the Lu family's house. She had some understanding in her heart, so she followed Lu Fian and Lu Fian's mother. After turning the corner, the main gate of the Lu family came into view. At this moment, Yun Jian's eyes narrowed. She frowned slightly as she looked at the front door of the Lu residence. A few people were smashing the door with hoes used by farmers. One of them was an old man who looked to be in his 60s or 70s. He was smashing the door with a hoe. He was cursing and yelling in a mournful manner. My grandchildren, my pitiful grandchildren, get the hell out here. Get out here. What kind of retired teacher is this? You killed my grandson, so I'll make your daughter pay with her life." From the old man's words, Yun Jian could tell that he was probably the grandfather of the student that Father Lu had accidentally stabbed to death. Chapter 409. In reality, Yun Jian's guess was right. This old man with a hoe and a group of people was the grandfather of the student, who was stabbed to death by Father Lu. The reason why Mother Lu was so flustered was because of this old man's rudeness. The innocent student was called Zhang Qin. He was a 12-year-old boy and was a 5th grader. With regards to Zhang Qin's death, Father Lu was dispirited. Father Lu had always been on the right path, and had never taken the wrong path. Even after being a teacher for his whole life, he was still humble. Father Lu would be condemned by his conscience for the rest of his life, for accidentally killing a student in school. On the other hand, Zhang Qin's grandfather was a farmer without any culture. After Zhang Qin's death, Father Lu's grandfather turned the wrongful death of Father Lu into hatred. Even when Lu Fian was still in school, Father Lu had wanted to chop her to death with a hoe. According to Father Lu had killed his grandson. A life for a life, and Father Lu had insisted on killing Lu Fian. Father Lu had been crying and scolding in front of the Lu family's house every day. After the winter break, Lu Fian did not dare to go out. Other than going to the police station to beg the police to visit Father Lu, Lu Fian did not dare to go out. Because the moment she went out, Father Lu would bring a group of people to kill her. There was once when Lu Fian was a step slower, and would have been stabbed in the stomach by Father Lu. That time, Lu Fian's down jacket was torn apart, revealing a huge hole. It wasn't that Lu Fian didn't know how to protect herself, but when she complained to the police about Zhang Qin's grandfather's behavior of transferring his hatred to her, the reason given by the police was that Lu Fian had to show evidence. There was no reason to talk nonsense. Lu Fian and Lu Fian's mother also felt that the police officers were most likely bribed by Zhang Qin's father. Now even if they called for help, there was no one to help them. But who told them to have no power or influence? They could only hide as much as they could. "Mom, let's go." When Lu Fian heard that, she hurriedly grabbed Mother Lu and Yun Jian with her other hand and wanted to hide. All of this happened in a split second. When Lu Fian's mother and Lu Fian's conversation ended, they had already run to the corner to hide. At the entrance of the Lu residence, someone from Zhang Qin's grandfather's group had already noticed Yun Jian and the other two. "There they are!" someone shouted. Zhang Qin's grandfather immediately turned around. He furrowed his brows fiercely and rushed over with a hoe in his hand. Zhang Qin's grandfather was an authentic farmer. Because he was uneducated and didn't know the law, and because Zhang Qin's grandfather had lived in his youth, he had always relied on himself to solve problems. His own grandson had been killed, and Zhang Qin's old-fashioned way of thinking told him that he had to kill the other party's daughter to avenge his grandson. Momentarily blinded by hatred, Zhang Qin's grandfather raised his hoe and charged towards Lu Fian and her mother. His speed was abnormally fast. "You deserve to die. Damn it." "Ah." Zhang Qin's grandfather completely ignored him and rushed over with a group of people. Most of these people were uncultured villagers like Zhang Qin's grandfather. They did not know that every injustice had its perpetrator, and every debt had its debtor. They also did not know that such things were handled by the law and the police. "Run, the two of you run." Mother Lu saw that it was too late. She pushed Lu Fian and Yun Jian, wanting to use her body to block Zhang Qin's grandfather, who was rushing over. Chapter 410. Seeing that Zhang Qin's grandfather was about to reach them with a hoe, Yun Jian's mother pushed Lu Fian and Yun Jian. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes, combining everything that had happened before, including Lu Fian's explanation to her. She could already guess the current situation. Yun Jian's mother did not forget to push her away when she pushed Lu Fian away. Yun Jian's eyes lit up, not expecting her mother to defend her as well. In spite of it, Lu Fian's behavior was inherited from her parents. "Mom, Lu Fian called out. At the same time, Yun Jian had extended her arm. Just as Lu Fian's mother was about to push her and Lu Fian away, she flipped her hand, and a pair of fair and clean hands coiled around Lu Fian's mother's wrist like a snake's body, pulling Lu Fian's mother to her side. At the same time, Yun Jian turned and stood where her mother was just now. Her position was the closest to Zhang Qin's grandfather, who was coming at them with a hoe. Both of you leave. Yun Jian pressed her lips together, but her expression remained unchanged. No, Xiao Jianyu, child, leave quickly. This has nothing to do with you. You shouldn't be dragged into this. The former was Lu Fian's panicked voice while the latter was her mother's. In their panic, both of them had completely forgotten that Yun Jian had revealed her identity as an advanced special forces soldier. Lu Fian had also forgotten about Yun Jian's unusual skills when she was still in Xinjiang town. Right now, Lu Fian and her mother's biggest worry was that they would drag the innocent Yun Jian into the mess. In spite of it, it was because of Lu Fian and her mother's kindness that Yun Jian was willing to befriend them or help them with their problems. Shoo! Yun Jian suddenly put her hand to her lips and glanced at Lu Fian and her mother before pressing her lips together, a sharp glint flashing in her eyes. Lu Fian and her mother were stunned by Yun Jian's action. However, while he was stunned, Zhang Qin's grandfather had already led a group of people over with hoes in their hands. Crowds had started to gather around them. Some passers-by could not help stopping to watch the situation from afar. Some were panicking while others covered their mouths, unable to believe that they were witnessing someone hacking someone with a hoe. Everyone was afraid of what would happen next. Yun Jian, who stood at the front, would be hacked through by the hoe. In spite of it, no one left due to the anticipation of watching a show. Some of them had already covered their eyes, not daring to watch the situation. As Zhang Qin's grandfather cursed, he was overwhelmed by his impulsiveness and was about to chop Yun Jian with his hoe. Lu Fian and her mother wanted to rush over to block the attack on her mother's behalf to help her. Yun Jian's to her. In the next second, she was on the move to move. If someone asked how fast the speed was, then they would tell you without hesitation that it was now. Raising her leg 180 degrees, she kicked the hoe in Zhang Qin's grandfather's hand that was at the front of the pack, causing him to fall to the ground. Then, Yun Jian used the same speed to weave between Zhang Qin's grandfather's helpers. Her speed was so fast that no one could keep their eyes on her. By the time Yun Jian passed through Zhang Qin's grandfather's helpers, they were all lying on the ground, and the hoe in their hands was nowhere to be seen. This scene set off a huge wave in everyone's eyes. Chapter 4:11. Yun Jian did look a little young, especially with her frail frame. Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men were different. Although they looked a little older, the way they rushed over with their hoes was even more ferocious. They did not look like old men at all. However, the reality was the complete opposite. In the end, it was Yun Jian, this seemingly weak little girl, who kicked the hoes of Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men far away. Wherever Yun Jian went, Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men fell. Although there were no fatal injuries, she still managed to subdue them. At least, the scene of blood splattering on the spot did not happen. However, after Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men fell to the ground, they still felt the pain of being scraped. Lu Fian and her mother were dumbfounded. Even Lu Fian, who had seen Yun Jian's abilities, could not help but sigh. Yun Jian's abilities seemed to be even more shocking than before. Lu Fian's mother, on the other hand, was stunned. In her impression, Yun Jian had always been a gentle and weak little girl. When Yun Jian showed her ASF certificate at the police station, it was enough to shock her mother. Now Lu Fian's mother was completely convinced. With such abilities, how did Yun Jian not look like an ASF soldier? The police are here. The police are here. Just then, someone in the crowd shouted. At that moment, Zhang Qin's grandfather and his men who were lying on the ground did not stand up again. Zhang Qin's grandfather kept cursing, but he could not stand up. Yun Jian pressed an acupoint on their cartilage. This acupoint was taught to her by the old man, who had taught her hypnotism in her previous life. As long as she used her wrist strength to press on an acupoint, the person would only be able to move after at least 10 minutes. Of course, this method was only temporary. Upon hearing that the police had arrived, some of the people who had taken up positions around the area hurriedly made way for several male police officers in police uniforms who were rushing to the scene. Xinjiang town was not big, but it was not small either. It was not surprising that the police would immediately rush over when something happened. What's more, the matter had already blown up. There were more and more people gathering around, and there would be a few of them who would run to the nearby police station to complain. What happened? What happened? What's going on? He asked 3 questions in a row. A tall and thin policeman with a round face walked over with a few other policemen behind him. Coincidentally, when they arrived, they saw Yun Jian and Zhang Qin's grandfather lying on the ground. What are you doing? What are you doing? Little girls don't learn to be good and learn to cause trouble? Once the tall officer saw it, he led a few other officers to Yun Jian's side, talking as he walked. It was obvious that this tall policeman was the superior of these policemen. His position was slightly higher than theirs. Just as the tall policeman led the policeman towards Yun Jian, a male policeman beside the tall policeman saw Yun Jian's face clearly. The male policeman suddenly trembled. He tugged at the tall policeman and pointed at Yun Jian, shouting, She, what about her? The tall policeman asked in confusion. Chapter 412. This male officer was the one Yun Jian had met at the police station not too long ago. After Lu Fian and her mother had left the police station after visiting her father, the male officer could not help bragging to his colleagues in the station that he had seen an advanced special forces member. He had even exaggeratedly gestured with his finger. He had said that the advanced special forces member was a young girl who looked less than 18 years old. At that time, the tall policeman even ridiculed the male policeman with a contemptuous sentence. An underage member of the advanced special forces? Do you think it's so easy to join the advanced special forces? Even if they're new, they're only candidates for the special forces after entering the training camp. Not everyone has the chance to become an advanced special forces member. After the tall officer had said that, he had even added proudly, My cousin is a special forces member. He's been in the special forces for more than 10 years, but he can't even cross the threshold of becoming an advanced special forces member. The tall officer had only said that to show off that he had a wider range of knowledge. At the same time, he wanted to express something. An underage member of the advanced special forces? Haha, he had to be kidding. The tall officer had even bragged to the other officers later on, until someone had suddenly run to the police station to say that something had happened somewhere. That was why they had come here in such an aggressive manner. At first, the tall officer had really thought that the male officer was bluffing. It was only until he saw Yun Jian standing in front of Zhang Qin's grandfather and others who were beaten to the ground and exuded her natural regal aura that the tall officer sucked in a deep breath, thinking that what the male officer said just now was not impossible. As for what the male officer had said earlier, it had indeed shocked everyone present. Even though they did not know what the advanced special forces represented, everyone present had heard what the male officer had said earlier. However, everyone had clearly heard what the policeman had just said. The girl in front of them who had beaten up Zhang Qin's grandfather, and the others was a special forces soldier. No wonder she was so powerful. With that thought, everyone was relieved and looked at Yun Jian as if they were looking at a powerhouse. Regardless of Yun Jian's identity, Yun Jian's ability had been displayed in front of them. This was an undeniable fact. Cough, cough, cough. Everyone get up. Those who are causing trouble, follow me back to the police station. The tall policeman was not stupid. He saw that Yun Jian was indeed not simple, so he did not deliberately put on airs. Instead, he walked over and patted Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others who were lying on the ground with his baton. Sheriff, we can't get up. I don't know what that wretched girl did to us just now, but now we can't even move. Zhang Qin's grandfather's helper saw that the police had come, So he said very respectfully, "Why can't you get up? Even if you can't get up, you still have to leave." The tall policeman wasn't polite to Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others. As he spoke, he turned around and instructed his men, "Each of you carry one of them and go back to the station to make a statement." Since the tall policeman who was one level higher than them had already spoken, the group of male policemen had no choice but to walk over and carry her. Yun Jian, Lu Fian, and Lu Fian's mother also went to the police station. After Yun Jian and the other two finished their statements, Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others could move. However, in the police station, Zhang Qin's grandfather and the others did not do anything else. Moreover, they had seen Yun Jian's skills. Just as Yun Jian and the other two walked out of the recording room, they saw a man in his 40s, dressed in a suit and leather shoes, rushing in from outside. The man ran to Zhang Qin's grandfather and frowned. "Dad, what's going on?" Chapter 413. Zhang Jiming looked very depressed. His not-so-handsome face had sunk in. It was obvious that Zhang Qin's death had dealt a huge blow to Zhang Jiming's family. Zhang Qin's grandfather pointed at Yun Jian and said a bunch of things to Zhang Jiming. The three of them heard it clearly. What Zhang Qin's grandfather said was naturally a description of what had happened. However, Zhang Qin's grandfather exaggerated the details of how Yun Jian and the rest were beaten up. Zhang Jiming frowned. After listening to Zhang Qin's grandfather, his frown was so deep that it could squash a fly. Just as Zhang Jiming was about to walk over to Yun Jian, her mother suddenly let go of Lu Fian and Yun Jian's hands. She ran over to Zhang Jiming and knelt down with a thud. The tears on Zhang Jiming's mother's cheeks had yet to dry. She did not have the time to wipe the tears off her face. Instead, she moved her knees 2 steps closer to Zhang Jiming. "I beg of you. I beg of you. This is my husband's fault. Please be magnanimous and stop bullying my daughter. She's innocent. She didn't do anything. If you want to kill her, come at me. I beg of you." Lu Fian's mother begged. Lu Fian's mother wasn't afraid of death, but she couldn't let her daughter live a life of fear, where she could be hacked to death anytime. People without power and status were always the weakest in society, because they couldn't get to know people who were better off than them. Yun Jian and Lu Fian didn't expect Lu Fian's mother to kneel down in front of Zhang Jiming. Mom, don't do this. Mom. Lu Fian shouted and rushed over. She squatted down and hugged Mother Lu, trying to pull her up. Lu Fian couldn't let her mother kneel down and beg for mercy. "Your daughter is innocent. But isn't my son innocent too?" Zhang Jiming looked at Lu Fian's mother coldly and kicked her away. He then looked at her and said, "My son is only in primary school. He's still so young. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Mother Lu kept apologizing as tears filled her eyes. She was apologizing for her husband's mistake. "Can I get my son back if you're sorry? Huh? Why can your daughter live well in this world? But my son is still so young, and he has to go to the Yellow Springs alone." Zhang Jiming's emotions were also stirred up. He even carried a thick aura of hostility, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "That's why I'm going to kill you. I'll kill your entire family. Ha ha ha. I'll kill your entire family for my pitiful son." Zhang Jiming's emotions had reached a peak. Just when the group of people was in a hubbub and attracted the police once again, a clear sound was heard as the police tried to pacify the crowd, but to no avail. Slap! A crisp sound rang out, and then it fell. Yun Jian had unknowingly stood in front of Zhang Jiming. Without saying a word, she ruthlessly slapped him. This slap thoroughly woke Zhang Jiming up. It also shocked the group of police, and made Lu Fian and her mother fall silent. For a moment, the surroundings were silent. Everyone could only hear the sound of breathing. At this moment, Yun Jian looked up. Her pair of sharp eyes were like a sharp sword, staring at Zhang Jiming. The young girl's voice was heard. Chapter 414. Yun Jian's words were like a baton to Zhang Jiming. He looked at Yun Jian blankly, opening his mouth but no words came out. As long as it involved his son, Zhang Jiming would become anxious. It's already happened. Do you think your son can come back to life just by using your little bit of power to stir up trouble? Yun Jian's words pierced right through Zhang Jiming's heart. However, she didn't stop there. Instead, she continued to speak in a tone that made people shudder. You're dreaming. How dare you say that? You. Zhang Qin's grandfather was enraged. He turned to look for his precious hoe to kill Yun Jian, but was stopped by Zhang Jiming. Zhang Jiming looked at Yun Jian and seemed to have calmed down a little. He frowned and looked at Yun Jian. Continue. You're the one who stopped them from visiting. Yun Jian narrowed her eyes and looked at Zhang Jiming. She pointed at Lu Fian and her mother. Not only Lu Fian and her mother, but even the group of police officers present were stunned on the spot. How did you know? Zhang Jiming was even more shocked. He exclaimed, not afraid that his actions would be exposed. The policemen were shocked. Other than Zhang Jiming and the people in the police station, no one else knew about this. How did this young lady know? Zhang Jiming quickly came back to his senses. He sneered and looked at Yun Jian, then at Lu Fian and her mother. So what if you know? Haha, do you think you're the chief of the police station? Do you think you can stop me from doing this? Zhang Jiming's voice was filled with anger as he spoke arrogantly. Zhang Jiming did not know that Lu Fian and her mother had already gone in to visit her father. Moreover, he did not know Yun Jian's identity as an advanced special forces soldier. That was why he was so arrogant. B****. How can our chief compare to her? The tall policeman had already believed that Yun Jian was an advanced special forces soldier. When he heard Zhang Jiming's words, he quickly stood up and scolded him. In fact, the tall policeman was afraid that Yun Jian would spread the news of him being bribed to Gu Junjian. Gu Junjian was a famous person in Z country. If the higher-ups investigated thoroughly, not to mention the money that Zhang Jiming had bribed them with, even all the policemen present would face the danger of losing their jobs. They couldn't afford to take this gamble. However, when Zhang Jiming heard the tall policeman's words, he felt that Yun Jian was inferior to the police chief. Oh, did you hear that? You can't even compare to the police chief. Zhang Jiming thought that the tall policeman was helping him to criticize Yun Jian. That was not all. Standing in the police station, in front of everyone, Zhang Jiming directly pointed his finger at Yun Jian. He raised his head high and continued. My son was killed by you, so you have to pay with your lives. Do you know that power is greater than the sky? Even if I kill all of you today, you won't be able to find any excuses. These few words seemed to have dragged everyone in the police station down with them. It did not matter if it was anyone else, but Yun Jian was an advanced special forces soldier, and one of Gu Yunjian's. Chapter 415. Zhang Jiming, who was slapped hard by the tall officer, was stunned. What did he mean by she was an advanced special forces soldier? What did he mean by their station chief's status could not be compared to hers? After the tall officer slapped Zhang Jiming with a grim face, he suddenly broke into a grin and walked to Yun Jian. He was spouting nonsense just now. Don't take it to heart. We, the police, will investigate this matter thoroughly and deal with it fairly and justly. Don't worry. The tall officer's words shocked everyone present, especially Zhang Jiming. Zhang Jiming dared to say that because he had bribed most of the officers in Xinjiang town's police station. Zhang Jiming did not expect everything to change once Yun Jian appeared. Lu Fian and her mother were dumbfounded when they heard the tall officer's words. Listening to the tall policeman's words, it seemed that the police station was going to reopen the case. After all, the root cause of the incident was the school's principal, who wanted to invite Lu Fian's father to the school for help. According to the law, the principal had to bear the corresponding legal responsibility as well. As for teacher Su, who knocked into Lu Fian's father and caused the bamboo pole to fall from the third floor, he was also the main person responsible for the incident. As long as the police station was willing to investigate the matter thoroughly, it meant that Lu Fian's father's sentence could be reduced. This news was probably the best outcome that Lu Fian and her mother could imagine for something like this to happen. After all, it was a fact that Lu Fian's father had accidentally killed someone. What? What about what you promised me? Zhang Jiming was dumbfounded. How much did he bribe the police station? The reason he gave the money back then was only to save his son from dying in vain. In the end, Yin Jian popped out of nowhere and ruined everything. Promise? What did we promise you? I'm warning you. If you or your father dare lay a hand on the mother and daughter again, the police station will arrest you. Even if the tall officer wanted to flatter Yun Jian, he was going to go all the way. You. Zhang Jiming glared at them and glared at Yun Jian, leaving Yun Jian with a message. I'll remember you. Humph, don't let me see you in Longmen City next time, or I'll make you suffer. He was the boss of a small business. He was still in the midst of negotiations, and was so close to collaborating with new crews. To Zhang Jiming, Yun Jian was a child from a poor family. Zhang Jiming dared not make a fuss in the police station, so he left with his grandfather and the rest of them. In spite of that, Zhang Jiming thought Yun Jian's eyes. Of course, she did not care about that at all. When Yun Jian revealed her identity as an advanced special forces soldier, she wanted the police to seek justice for Father Liu. It was already noon when she came out of the police station again. Yun Jian finally entered the Liu family's house. In order to thank her, Mother Liu cooked a table full of dishes. It was only then that Yun Jian took out 10,000 yuan from her backpack, and the envelope Qin Yiru gave her, and passed it to her mother. Yun Jian's mother refused to accept it at first, saying that she was already grateful for Yun Jian's help. How could she accept Yun Jian's money? Moreover, it was 12,000 yuan. It was a sum of money even in modern times, what more in the 98s. However, the Liu family was definitely short of money after what had happened. In the end, Yun Jian said that the money was a loan to them, and that Liu Fian could work for her when she grew up. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.